afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Wednesday, September 9th, 2025, and we are at Carmel City Hall, and I'm calling this special meeting of the Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council to order at 3 p.m. City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Byrne?
Here.
Councilmember Buder?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Delves?
Here.
Councilmember Dramov? Here. Mayor Byrne?
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. Welcome to all attending today in person and remotely, and thank you for investing your time and attention to help us manage our city. This meeting is conducted in a hybrid format. You can view this meeting and participate online with comments on Zoom or live stream, or watch this meeting later on the city's YouTube page if you don't wish to make a public comment. Nova, could you read the public comment instructions?
During special city council meetings, public comments are permitted only for items listed on the agenda. After each item on the agenda is introduced and after questions from the council, the mayor will invite public comment on that item. In all cases, each speaker has 3 minutes to speak unless otherwise adjusted. We'll first hear comments from those present in person, followed by Zoom participants. While stating your name is optional, it helps to identify speakers in the meeting minutes. Remote or in-person participants who do not comply with the requirements of the Brown Act will be muted.
Thank you. Today we have the consent agenda process and one public hearing. Items on the consent agenda are routine in nature and do not require discussion or independent action. Members of the council or the public may ask that any items be considered individually for council discussion and or public comment. Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. Nova, could you put up the consent agenda items on the screen?
Yeah.
I'll be reading those items, and there are 6 today. Item 1, August 4th, 2025 special meeting minutes and August 5th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Item 2, July 2025 monthly reports. And once again, I'd encourage all of you to go through those reports. There's some pretty interesting stuff in there. Item 3, July 2025 check register summary. Item 4, Resolution 2025-073, authorizing the purchase of 2 electric 2025 Ford F-150 Lightnings with Watsonville Ford under Sourcewell contract number 091521-NAF in the amount of $121,857.56. Resolution 2025-075, designating the 2025 holiday closure from December 24th, 2025 through January 2nd, 2026. Pardon? Oh, I did? When the light went off, I missed it. Resolution 2025-074, approving revisions to City Policy C89-02. How could I miss that one? City Council meetings, orders of council, agenda packets, minutes of meeting, and agenda distribution. So we have 6 of those items. Would anyone from the council like to pull any of those items for questions and or discussion? You're not going to do it, Hans, are you? He didn't pull item 5. Okay. None? None?
Is it for conversation tomorrow, if we pull something? Yeah, let's pull number 6.
Okay. We're pulling number 6, so we'll leave that till tomorrow to the meeting. And do I have a motion for approving the other 5?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Byrne?
Yes.
Councilmember Buder?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Delves?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramov?
Yes.
Mayor Byrne?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, that was quick. All right, before we move into the public hearing, and I'm not going to be here, so the public hearing will be covered by Jeff, correct? Councilperson Byrne. I have a public statement I'd like to read to put it on the record before I recuse myself and leave the dais. Colleagues and neighbors, Carmel is a small town, and that is both our greatest blessing and sometimes our biggest challenge. We know one another, we volunteer together, we celebrate together, but when disputes arise, that closeness can also be turned against us. I've experienced this personally with the JB Pastor appeal. In this case, friends of mine who know I am an ethical and fair person because I've served with them on city work groups, have assisted them in solving their longstanding neighborhood water incursion issues, and have frequented their retail store for years, have sought to disparage me and petition for my recusal in this matter. The reason? My unpaid role as a volunteer executive director of Carmel Cares and a donation Esperanza Carmel made to that 501c3 nonprofit organization a year and a half ago, long before I ever considered running for mayor. When a donor supports Carmel Care's mission to keep our beautiful safe and inviting, they are supporting Carmel itself. Yet suddenly a charitable gift aimed at improving Forest Theater and beautifying our downtown is framed as binding me personally. By that logic, nearly anyone involved in our nonprofit network, and there are hundreds of donors and volunteers, could be accused of bias in city matters someday because a group wants to remove their voice from proceedings like this. What also saddens me is that since this issue was last on the agenda, an appellant asked me why I recused myself, while another asked me for a Carmel Gives donation to one of his passion projects. They obviously don't realize that they have become part of these tactics that damage the very community spirit that holds Carmel together. This isn't just about me. When involvement or donations are twisted into accusations, it discourages the very things that make our village thrive. Why would volunteers step forward or thoughtful people run for office if every civic connection could be turned into a weapon? These tactics may very well succeed in the short term, but they erode the trust we need in government. Residents begin to see the process not as fair or open, but as a cynical chess game where technicalities matter more than common sense. That's not healthy for City Hall, and it's not healthy for Carmel. I pledge to follow the Fair Political Practices Commission rules, and I will always step back if there's a true conflict of interest. But to suggest that my volunteer work, where my wife and I make no financial benefit, disqualifies from this appeal, that's ridiculous. We can and will disagree about projects, zoning, and buildings, but weaponizing community service, philanthropy, and the city's planning process harms everyone. So I will now step back from the dais, knowing that my colleagues will run a fair process, and knowing that I have the support of the vast majority of this town. But let's be clear, Carmel deserves better than cynical tactics that punish those who serve and turn our planning processes into a litigious nightmare. What matters most is preserving the spirit and the charm of this village we all love, and the ability for property owners to improve their town. And with that, I'll leave. Thank you.
So it's my turn. I don't think I'll get applause for this one. I also have to recuse myself. The reasons are much more simple, also involved a donation. One of the appellants, almost a year ago today, when I was running for this office, threw a lovely party for me at his restaurant. The value of that exceeded $500. The state's fair campaign practices laws basically say that if someone does that for you, you cannot judge a matter that involves that person for the next year. While a remedy to that was available, I chose not to take it, so I do need to recuse myself as well. So, thank you.
So thank you, everyone. I'm Councilmember Byrne. I'll be running this hearing. This is Appeal 25115. A continuation from the August 4th, 2025 City Council hearing, which is the consideration of an appeal 25115 Esperanza Carmel Commercial JB Pastor Building, filed by Krista Ostowich on behalf of Mike Brown, Mike Kate, Don Goodhue, Steve Hilliard, Vince Kohler, Courtney Kramer, Cindy Lloyd, Ian Martin, Rich Pepe, Chrissy Reamer, and Julie Wendt of the Planning Commission's approval of Design Review DR 23140, Use Permit UP 21-113, Lot Merger LM 20-394, and associated environmental determination for the JB Pastor Building located at Dolores Street, 2 southwest of 7th Avenue in the Service Commercial District at lots 6, 8, and 10 of Block 91. The AP ends are listed on the agenda. And also to consider the adoption of Resolution 2025-076. As I did last month, I'd like to go over the format of this hearing. To begin, we'll have the staff report. Next, we will have council member questions of staff. We will then, I'm going to deviate from what's in the agenda a tiny bit. We will then have 5 minutes by each side to make an opening statement. We will then have questions from the council if there are any of the attorneys. We will then have public comments, 3 minutes per person with the exception of the attorneys who have already spoken. We will then have, at the close of public comment, 5 minutes of time for each side to summarize or rebut what they have said or heard, and then we will have council member deliberations. And with that, why don't we begin with the staff report?
Is it on? Oh, wait, this isn't the, it's in PDF. How do you?
Thank you, council, members of the public. This is the appeal of the Esperanza Carmel JB Pastor building project. So the subject site is at Dolores Street 2 southeast of 7th Avenue in the Service Commercial Zoning District. The project is for the construction of a new 12,971 square foot, 2-story mixed-use development. The project was approved by the Planning Commission on April 9th of this year. Following that approval, a timely appeal is filed. The specific action being appealed was the approval of the design review, lot merger, use permit, and the CEQA action. The grounds for appeal were discussed at the last hearing and are described on the screen. The council considered the appeal at the August 4th hearing last month. Following deliberation, the item was continued to this hearing, September 8th, with direction to staff to prepare a new resolution reflecting the council's finding for formal adoption, specifically on the matter of parking and landscaping, and then also preparing recommended motions pertaining to the following: maximum floor area, consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards, and the associated environmental review. So I do apologize for the following slides. They are a bit text heavy, but I just want to make sure it's understood what the actual resolution and motions contained. So the first item is the resolution pertaining to parking. So the finding is that the municipal code provides that the Planning Commission may authorize satisfaction of the parking requirements through granting of a use permit and the payment of in lieu fees when on-site parking is not practical or when on-site parking is prohibited by city policies, and that the City Council finds that the project does not comply with Municipal Code Section 17.38.030C because there has not been a sufficient showing that on-site parking is not practical. And then we have 3 findings to support this. That the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that providing underground parking as a means of satisfying the on-site parking requirement under Municipal Code Section 17.38 is not practical. The applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that due to the topography, size, shape, or a particular condition of the site, or that existing development on the site would make the provision of on-site parking impractical to support participation in the in lieu parking program. And third, the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking lift system can be operated safely. So that is part. Oh, you were timing that really good. I had no idea. If you go back one. So that's part A. So there's two parts to the parking. Now if you can go forward, I'll just put this down. Next one, please. So part B, it's supported by the same three findings. So part B is Municipal Code Section 17.38.030C2 requires that an applicant diligently pursue meeting the parking requirements both on-site and off-site, but has been unsuccessful in meeting the requirement, or that the site is located within the central commercial land use district where on-site parking is prohibited. And the City Council finds that the project does not comply with City Municipal Code Section 17.38.030C2 because there has not been a sufficient showing that the applicant has diligently pursued meeting the parking requirements both on-site and off-site. And then again, supported by those same three sub-findings. So we can continue. So second part, landscaping. Municipal Code Section 17.34.080A1 requires that a minimum of 50% of the required open space on each site shall be landscaped. The City Council finds that the project does not comply with the city's landscaping requirements in Municipal Code Section 17.34.080A1 or the intent of those landscape requirements because the project's landscaping on the roof should not be included in the calculation of the 50% landscape requirement because this landscaping would not be visually accessible, and without the inclusion of the landscaping proposed on the roof, the project will have less than 50% of the required open space landscaped. So those are the two findings for parking and landscaping, and then the actual action is City Council of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea does hereby remand this project to the Planning Commission for further consideration of this project based on the findings of the City Council in this resolution and direction provided by the City Council through the motions adopted at the City Council meeting on September 8th, 2025. So we have the resolution, and then we also have the following motions. So in summary, the motions are that the project complies with the maximum floor area requirements, the project is consistent with the Secretary of Interior's standards, and that the project reviewed by the council is categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15331, class 31. And then I also have the full text of the motions as we continue. So in terms of the recommendations, staff had a recommendation in the staff report regarding public comment. However, I believe we have alternative direction on the public comment recommendation, so we can continue on. In terms of the first recommendation regarding the resolution, staff's recommendation is to adopt a resolution. So this is the resolution pertaining to landscaping and parking. So in the title of the resolution, parking and landscaping is not specifically called out, but this is within the actual text of the resolution. So adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea remanding the project back or to the Planning Commission for further consideration based on the findings in the resolution. So that would include parking and landscaping. And then for the motion, we have motion finding for the purposes of consideration by the Planning Commission upon remand that the Esperanza Carmel Commercial JB Pastor Building Project as considered by the City Council on August 4th and September 8th complies with the maximum floor area requirements pursuant to section 17.14.140C. And then motion finding for the purpose of consideration by the Planning Commission upon remand that the project as considered by the City Council is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards based on City Council Resolution 2023-099 and further directing city staff to present to the Planning Commission on remand additional analysis addressing the project's consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards. And then the last recommendation being motion finding for the purpose of consideration by the Planning Commission upon remand that the project as considered by the council on August 4th and September 8th is categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15.331, class 31. And that concludes my presentation. That was the 5 recommendations. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Evan. Any questions of staff?
I've got one. Thank you for your presentation, Evan. I have a question about the restaurant parking issue. We just barely touched upon it during our last meeting, and it was the subject of an in-depth letter from Julie Wendt. I don't want to go into all the weeds and the details of it, but the gist of it is the restaurant is now on lots 2 and 4. The valet service must be operated with all cars parked off-street. If discontinued, then 8 of the off-street spaces must be provided on the site, parcels 2, 4, 6, and 8. And so the only place it could go is on lot 6 and 8, and that is now part of the new project. So can you explain how that would work with the restaurant and valet parking, and then how that would be affected by all this?
I might jump in on that one if that's okay, because I think this one maybe predates Evan, and I, in my capacity when I was the director of community planning and building, was involved in this. So the question at hand, actually the language that you read in part came from one of the conditions on a couple of the use permits associated with the site. The full text language is valet parking may be utilized for restaurant customers, so it's not a shall. And if it is going to be used only and shall be contained on site. So that's where the bit of the confusion was. So it's not a requirement. Valet parking was not a requirement for the site, nor did the conditions of approval require a specific number of parking spaces for the site. There was a series of permits. There was a use permit 16-191, and then there was a 17-365, which was granted but then expired. And then there was 18-229. Every time a permit comes forward, it talks about superseding all others. So in the active permit, there's no conditions requiring spaces if they don't use a valet service. There's no conditions requiring parking spaces at all. Our municipal code has language that talks about how many parking spaces are required for a use. However, when the property was split, it already was separate parcels. When the other parcels were sold, because there was no requirement, there was no conditions of approval saying that there had to be parking spaces there, effectively what was created was a non-conforming situation. So I hope that answers your question. No
more questions? So now I'd like to start with 5 minutes, 5 minutes for each side. Do we have a representative of the appellants?
My name is Julie Wendt, and I'm going to read a letter from our attorney because she could not be here today.
Julie, could you hold on 1 second?
Go?
Yes, please start your time over.
Go.
Thank
Okay.
you, Julie.
There are 2 parts that the appellants really dug into after the first half of this appeal, and the Steve Hilliard letter will address the other part. I'm going to address the historic preservation portion that remains. So because she could not attend, I'll be reading a summary of our attorney's findings. Her focus is on a single issue, the legal flawed recommendation that you adopt motion number 3. First, as you saw in her analysis, the attorney bolded and italicized the words "based on." Why? Because it matters legally how a body supports its legal actions. Here, the council is being asked to make a legal determination that a project does not harm a historic site based on an internal self-authored document that their own 2023 resolution, rather than based on the state-required professional assessment. Courts require the determinations be based on the state-mandated document. Second, the council's 2023 resolution caused the applicant to begin a newly designed proposal, no document can evaluate the historic sensitivity of a future project that does not yet exist. Therefore, a resolution calling for a redesign cannot simultaneously act as a, quote, determination of consistency, end quote, of that redesign. Bodies must always evaluate the project that is in front of them. Adopting motion number 3 would mean applying a 2023 council discussion about a first iteration of a project, not just to a second iteration that you have already rejected, but to the third iteration that does not yet exist. Third, motion number 3 asks the council to reaffirm the flawed 2023 historic assessment only of the art wall, which did not thoroughly analyze the impacts to a historic resource of a new retail and residential building sitting directly on that resource. Fourth, this is a de novo hearing. Prior findings do not bind this council, and indeed, this council has a legal duty to correct earlier errors, not to repeat them. And finally, the courts have been clear. The Secretary's standards are the benchmark. Without a valid historical assessment addressing this specific project, there is no substantial evidence of consistency. And without that, the project cannot be deemed exempt under CEQA. We hope that this legal research and analysis prepared helps you thoroughly evaluate the city's obligations under state and local law. In light of this, the proper action now is to reject the 2023 resolution and substitute a motion to require city compliance with the professional historic assessment mandate. And as I said earlier, others will address the Steve Hilliard research that was submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Do we have a representative of the applicant?
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremiah Reynolds. I'm representing the applicant here today. We are here today not only to address the merits of the pending appeal, but also to raise a critical due process concern. In a quasi-judicial proceeding such as this one, the law requires that applicants receive a fair and impartial hearing. This means decisions must be made by a body free from bias and improper recusals. Unfortunately, what occurred at the August 4th hearing fell far short of that standard. First, Mayor Byrne was improperly advised to recuse himself based solely on Mr. Pastor's charitable donations to Carmel Cares. The Political Reform Act makes clear that contributions to a nonprofit from which an official receives no personal benefit do not create a conflict. Mayor Byrne himself confirmed he receives no salary or personal gain. His participation in this process should have never been barred. Second, Councilmember Byrne acknowledged his own conflict, but was nonetheless directed by the city attorney to participate in order to form a quorum. The law does not permit the city attorney to handpick which recused member participates. State regulations require that if recusals reduce the council below quorum, the city must conduct a random draw to select the necessary number of officials. That procedure was not followed here. Finally, Councilmember Dramov has previously acted as an appellant against this very project, and at the last hearing again demonstrated her bias by, among other actions, dismissing the City Council's prior binding resolution. Having already taken an advocacy role against this project, her continued participation undermines the fairness of these proceedings. Indeed, there are substantial questions as to whether there has been cooperation and collaboration with the appellants here today. Now, turning to the merits of this appeal. This project has been before this city and city bodies for more than 6 years. Since 2019, Esperanza has revised, redesigned, and resubmitted in response to shifting requirements and repeated appeals. Each time, my client has worked in good faith to address concerns, whether by preserving the community room, retaining the historic wall, or adjusting the size and design of the entire project. After years of working cooperatively with the Planning Commission, on April 9th, 2025, the Planning Commission finally approved this project, adopting detailed findings of compliance with the zoning code, CEQA exemptions, and prior city council conditions. The highly professional staff of this city also recommended denial of the appeal and affirmed that the project meets all requirements. Now, as you know from the last hearing, an earlier version of this very project included a fully excavated underground garage that would have provided all required parking on site. But when this council in 2023 required preservation of the historic community room and wall, the project had to be redesigned from the ground up. The preservation buffer effectively makes the option of an underground garage infeasible, as has been shown to the Planning Commission. Only after complying with these preservation mandates did Esperanza Carmel rely on the city's in lieu parking program, a program expressly authorized by the municipal code for these very circumstances. Now, after forcing the applicant to preserve the historic elements, opponents are using that very redesign that was caused by the city council's directives as a weapon to argue that parking and landscaping have deficiencies. This is fundamentally unfair. Esperanza Carmel complied with historic preservation requirements and relied on the parking in lieu code provisions that the city provides. Nonetheless, this council has allowed opponents to relitigate issues already resolved. Indeed, they want to relitigate again here today, even potentially reopening questions the city council itself settled by resolution in 2023. This not only undermines the role of the Planning Commission, which is tasked with applying the code and interpreting technical provisions, but this potentially violates the due process rights of my client. This project would deliver new housing, new jobs, new retail space, and public improvements in Carmel's downtown. Instead, my client faces continued delays and the risk of a remand and appeal process that will never end. We have no assurance that any parking system is acceptable to this council. Now, we respectfully urge the council to honor the years of work by its own staff and the Planning Commission and to end this cycle of delay. This city cannot send the message that even after years of compliance and approvals, investment in Carmel is subject to endless political obstruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I'd ask, I would really ask that we not have applause for people that come up to the microphone. Any questions of either attorney, either side? Okay, so now we will start with public comment, 3 minutes per person. Feel free to start.
My name is Fred Kern. With Jeff Peterson, and as his agent, I'm the developer who developed the property in 2018 with the architect Adam Zeselnik. We brought a project in front of Planning Commission and were approved. And in that, we were tearing the wall down, moving the building to the north 3 feet. The wall, just so everyone's clear, when we did the restaurant, we took the flower boxes off, scraped off the concrete, we put new stone and stucco on there, and we built a wall that's further to the east that never was there. So this thing about the wall being historic, I know the attorney said it, it's not. It's impossible because I built half of it. And this entire project has been delayed, in my opinion, for ridiculous reasons, but I think the main purpose is the same problem we went through with Ms. Reimers, who lives behind there, who really considers that her view plane and that she should be allowed to have it, and the owner of the property should be denied his rights. I'm not a big fan of the design, but I am a fan of following the rules. And he clearly followed the rules, and I followed the rules, and that building wasn't historic when I started, and 50 years later they made it historic, but when I did it, Mr. Goodhue had to put an apology in the newspapers to me because he called me a committer of architectural hate crimes. And I said, you're going to have to apologize to me. It's in the pine cone in that period of time. I just want to say, there's a lot of not so truthful things being told here. Anybody wants to ask me about this, interview me, or have me in a deposition, I'd be glad to do it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Fred. Again, please, I'd ask you to show some respect for this process, and please hold your applause. Next. No one else?
Hi, I'm Joe DiNucci, resident for 5 glorious years, owner for 42 years. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I have 3 points to make. 1, people are talking about litigation. The only thing we need less than consultants in this town are lawyers. With all due respect to lawyers, you are not what we need right now. Litigation will cost both sides a lot of money. And if it happens, Carmel will have a lot less money, a lot more hard feelings and polarization, no new housing, no new retail, no new parking. Why would we do that? We do not need lawyers or judges deciding what we do in Carmel. The city council was elected to make decisions that represent us. Do your jobs. Dale Byrne belongs on this dais, casting a vote on this issue. His recusal was a serious mistake and an insult to him and to the rest of the citizens of the city. It was based on Esperanza's 2023 donation to Carmel Cares. That 6-figure donation benefited Carmel, every penny, not Dale Byrne, not his campaign. This is one of the most impactful decisions of his tenure. The voters deserve to have him present and accountable for what happens. Esperanza has a solid track record of valuable additions to this town. They are a solid local business. Why are we treating this developer differently? Why are options like in-lieu parking, usable by many others, not allowed for Esperanza? Why? Things have gotten heated over this. I'd like to ask all citizens to take a breath, remember we all love this city, and have some reasonable compromises that get this project going. A pebble-encrusted wall, with all due respect, is not more valuable to Carmel than the very valuable project and the homes, jobs, and parking it will provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Hello, I'm Charlie Thomas, and I'm here to give my support, as well as my neighbors of 10th Avenue and Monte Verde, the 8 of us, in support of Mr. Pastor's project. We all feel that it has just had one roadblock and another put up before him. He's redesigned. He's a wonderful gift that we have to the community, and I just think it's shameful that we're treating him in the way that we have been. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Hi, my name is Andy Carr. I've lived in Carmel for 50 years. I have been both a homeowner and a business owner. I've come before the council many a time, checking all the boxes, doing everything I was supposed to do, and then holding my breath, worrying about who was going to show up, what they were going to object to, because what I had seen in the past from other business owners and residential people as well. This is like a problem on steroids. I've never seen anything like this. I don't understand it. There's been plenty of opportunity to give input and feedback for all this amount of time. Why now? Where have these people been? And I don't think it's fair to single out one person. I stand before you today not just speaking about Patrice Pastor, but representing individuals who you buy a piece of property, you follow all the rules and regulations, you're approved by the staff that we hire to get us through the process. you're approved from the Planning Commission. And now this, it's just incomprehensible to me. And I hope you put a stop to it. And for those people that are objecting, I am not opposed to your opinions, but there's a time and a place, and it needs to be done. If you want to change the rules, change them appropriately. Don't go after one person. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Well, I was going to say Mr. Mayor, but he's not here and I can't get him back here. So I'm a little nervous, so I'm going to read this. Members of the City Council, thank you for this opportunity. Really appreciate it. My name is Greg Cole. My wife and I have lived and operated a business in Carmel-by-the-Sea for almost 50 years. My intention with my 3 minutes is to ask you to please consider completely revamping your building permit process. As anyone who's ever gone through the process knows, the system is broken and it needs to be fixed. I was recently at City Hall to renew my business license and I overheard a conversation with a resident who was attempting to get a permit to re-roof his house. The patient clerk at the window indicated that unfortunately the person responsible for issuing the permits was at a 2-week training seminar. The resident asked if he could fill out the application for the work to get the ball rolling, and he was told that he would have to wait until the person in charge of the permits returned. He asked how long it would take after the application was filed, and he was told the contract, he was ready to go to get it done by winter time. He was told that the entire process would take several months. The resident left in frustration with no recourse. The council's recent decisions involving Patrice Pastor and his projects are my second case in point. According to the Carmel Pinecone, the pit has been through 4 or 5 redesigns over 5 years. They recently received the demolition permit after an additional 7-month delay. Mr. Mayor and council, part of your platform that got you elected was getting the permit process moving more efficiently. It's unfortunate that there can't be a meeting of the minds, including the 11 individuals opposing Mr. Pastor, since that seems to be a part of this. On behalf of Mr. Pastor and anyone who's tried to get a permit from the city, how long is too long? When is enough enough? Now's the time to get this done. And a final note to Mr. Pastor, the Esperanza family, and his supporters, please don't give up. As evidenced by the letters to the Carmel Pinecone, you've got a mandate of support from the community, and we want you and your team to stay the course. Please have patience with our broken systems. The rewards will be felt for generations to come.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
My name is John Good, and I'm here, like the others, to support Patrice Pastor, Chris Mitchell, and the Esperance Carmel team. I want to make 4 points today. It's become increasingly clear that the Carmel City Council is engaged in using a double standard when it comes to building project applications. The evidence for this is relatively widespread, but I will just focus on the pit versus Hofs's house. The handling of the pit, and it's been described going through many revisions, was rejected because in part it didn't have a traditional Carmel look. Well, the last time I looked at the Pinecone rendition of what is going to go on at the Hofs's house, and I'm sure it'll turn out to be a very nice looking building, it looks nothing like traditional Carmel. Overriding Carmel Planning Department approvals seems to only happen when Esperanza Carmel is involved. Another double standard. By the way, the provision of common sense variances on project applications is not breaking the law. It is common practice. The belief that 1/3 of 1%, that for you decimal lovers is 0.003 of Carmel residents should dominate the discussion of Pastor building proposals, rather than listening to the other 99.7% of Carmel residents, seems misplaced. Past a certain point, the 11 critics cease to be interested in educating or persuading, but only in using the levers of power to say no. Recently, Pastor's charitable contributions to Carmel's Cares, a wonderful organization. I hope all of you in this room contribute to that. It is a wonderful organization. But they were used to force, in one case, the recusal of the mayor. I am aghast, appalled, and dismayed. Those funds, when they go into the 501(c), are the property of Carmel. The mayor can take a trip to Hawaii, but he's not going to be able to get his hands on those funds. It is disgraceful what has just taken place here. What we need in Carmel is an all-hands-on-deck mentality. But what we're dealing with is a city council that is dividing.
Almost done, Mr. Good?
What?
Almost done?
Many of us also
30
need to
seconds.
regain trust in our elected leaders. Patrice, Pastor, and Esperanza Carmel may have some of the answers needed to preserve what is good in Carmel and bring success in the future to our beloved village. I highly encourage the Carmel City Council and the City of Carmel to support his efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Good.
Hi, my name's Stacy Steele. Thank you, guys. I just wanted to say I heard the wall again, the historic wall mentioned, and I wanted to say again, I've lived here almost 30 years, my husband many years longer. I never knew about that wall, and he's shown me everything. I mean, he's shown me everything in town, but not that. So I did go by and I looked at it, and I went on inside, and the way that it was on the inside, I don't even want to go there, but I will. There were tables smashed against the wall on the inside of the business, but on the outside, okay, I saw it. I did my little Instagram reel. It was great. But I went to the library a few weeks later, and I got the book that our councilwoman did, 7D, the property, and there were 2 photographs, but there was no wall for that historic property in the book. And I just thought that was super interesting because you may not have known about that wall either. And and I heard the gentleman say it's not historic. So anyway, I don't feel so bad not knowing about it. But the landscaping, I heard that too. And I just remembered when that bathroom, the public bathroom was built down on Scenic, and they did that rooftop landscaping. It was such a big deal. Everybody loved it. It was the best thing ever. And it seems like it'd be the same thing here with Pastor's project. Really great landscaping on the, like they do in other places. But it's Pastor, and I think that's why it's not so great. But remember how it was? I don't know if you remember, but it was such a big deal when they did that landscaping on the roof down at the bathroom. Sounds Scenic. And I'm just sad to see how it's all working out, and I'm really sad to see that only 3 of you might be voting, and it's such a big thing. And another thing I'm super sad about is that we're putting so much energy on this piece of property when all of our addresses might change. And we might all get 4 digits on every single house in the square mile. That's going to change the historic properties of our village. I don't think it's going to be what happens at 7D or whatever.
Thank you, Ms. Steele.
Hi, my name is Julia Christopher. I am here today as a concerned multi-generational resident of Carmel and local small business owner. You have no idea how much it breaks my heart to see our community calling our very own planning commission incompetent, hiring attorneys and fighting each other when Carmel and the entire state of California is in the middle of a dire housing crisis. We should all be supporting our planning commission and working together with Esperanza, a local company that does beautiful and thoughtful work owned by a local resident who has done so much good for our community. That said, I must ask City Council a question because I agree that we desperately need parking for our community. Why did you reject Esperanza's plan that included underground parking? Is that wall really more important than parking for our community? And I would like to thank Fred Kern for stepping forward and saying what he said. In an effort to resolve this conflict, why don't you just approve the plan they submitted in 2023? If not, okay, we should all be fully supporting the plan in front of us today, because why else would you reject Esperanza's plan for in-lieu parking when it's allowed in our building codes, and Gunnar Reimers used the same program for Reimers Danish Bakery in 1977. Again, after 6 years, 5 thoughtful redesigns that are in line with Carmel's beautiful and charming architecture, Esperanza has made it perfectly clear that the in-lieu parking program is the best they can do under the circumstances. We all love Carmel, and as a community, we should not only be upholding our Planning Commission's unanimous decision to approve this project, we should be thanking Esperanza and expediting this project, as well as all their other projects, as quickly as possible to provide desperately needed housing and retail spaces for our small business community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Christopher. Next.
Good afternoon, Jerry Paratori. I'm gonna keep this simple. No matter what you guys do here today, there's gonna be tough feelings. My suggestion is, let's approve this project, deny the appeal, and move on to the important things we have to do in Carmel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the City Council. My name is Henry Runke. I'm an architect, and I'm also the architect on the Pitt project. I was not requested to come here today by JB for this building, nor from Esperanza. I actually called them and said, can I speak? I said, I read this article in the Pinecone, and there's suggestions that the project should be redesigned or studied for the underground parking component. And I have looked at this project from afar. The documents are on public record. So as it's gone through the process, I've followed the project, but I've never got engaged. Just to let you know, when we do an underground parking garage, we've got a big ramp. We've got to have enough room for van accessible parking spaces. So we've got to have a lot of height, which means our ramps get real long. We've got to have drive aisles. In this situation, we also have to set back from elements such as the wall, the community room. And then when you set back from a property line, we can't build to a property line. You've got to have shoring, you've got to have drainage, you've got to actually have a wall. And before you know it, this property that's 12,000 feet becomes maybe 7,000 feet. And before you know it, all the effort to put parking underground is basically an offset for the surface parking that you have up in the project today. So I looked at that and I said, can I come in and talk about the underground parking? I've done enough of it. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze in this situation. But I will add that I was also subject to multiple reviews by the Planning Commission. Fortunately, we weren't appealed to the City Council. But during that process, what I really understood was that you got a great Planning Commission. We got a better project at the end of the day than the first one we submitted. You need to really rely on their expertise, their experience to be able to provide great guidance. You need to be able to rely on your great city staff to put together the findings and the reports and the recommendations. And to do a 180 on this project with this type of support after this much process, I find very difficult. And so that's why I'm here today, not to speak on myself, not to speak toward my project, but to speak toward a project that I think needs to move on. And I think you have all the tools, all the information you need, And I would just recommend that the city council support your planning commission, support your staff, and support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Runke. Anybody else? Well, let's have someone.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Katie Ania. I'm here actually representing Greg Freeman, who's our board chair. He was coming at 4:30 today, so he's still en route, but asked me if I could read a statement on behalf of our board of directors. We'd like to express our support for Esperanza Carmel. Esperanza has been a good business neighbor, demonstrating a consistent commitment to operating responsibly and investing in our community. They've shown that they value both the character of Carmel and the partnerships that make our village thrive. As a chamber, we believe strongly in transparent and predictable processes that allow responsible businesses to succeed, and feel that when these businesses follow the established rules and invest in our community, they deserve recognition and support. Carmel's long-term prosperity depends on cultivating business partners who respect the uniqueness of our community while contributing to its vitality. Esperanza represents that kind of partner. Thank you for the opportunity to share the Chamber's perspective and for your continued service to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Mike?
Members of the council and staff, my name is Mike Brown, a resident of Carmel-by-the-Sea. It had been my intention to speak on the parking and ground cover failures of this project. Many have shared pretty much what I would say, so I shall share a point which I find of interest. When I think back of Carmel's history, I cannot think of any time in which as many as 11 civil-minded residents have appealed any city commission decision to our city council. In fact, getting 11 members of our community to agree on most issues is a miracle in itself. The grounds for this appeal come from in-depth study over many hours and a realization this project fails to meet our codes as written today. Your hearing our appeal and giving consideration is greatly appreciated. Thank you from all 11 members of our appeal. Keeping it short and sweet, too.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else from the chambers? Going once? This is it. I'm not coming back to the chambers after we go online. So if you're in the chambers and you want to speak, please come forward.
Acting Mayor Byrne, Councilmember Booter, Councilmember Dramov, city staff, my name is Cindy Lloyd. As an almost 80-year-old native Carmelite, I have witnessed many changes in Carmel. I've heard many voices for and against projects. I've witnessed many compromises. Recently, many letters have been written and read. Emails have been shared. Words have been spoken. The intent of our appeal was not personal. It did not consider wealth. It was focused solely on the misinterpretations of our general plan, municipal code, and other civic regulations. They were written to preserve Carmel, written to ensure Carmel would remain human-scaled, maintaining her dignified character while coexisting amongst nearby buildings. Thank you for your previous acknowledgement of two important points: the landscaping and the parking requirements for the proposed JB Pastor building. Now is the time to confront and deliberate the remaining issues before you today. We all share a common concern that the Carmel we love remains healthy, with architecture conforming to standards created by former community leaders, with buildings constructed that respect our governing rules. Personally, I wish Esperanza success going forward. We do need housing in Carmel. affordable housing in order that those who work here can afford to live here. I met Mr. Pastor briefly and found him friendly and pleasant. I hope his projects in Carmel thrive. As a community, my hope is that we can come together, move beyond divisions, and find a mutually shared pathway forward towards success. It has been done before. It can be done now. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hi, my name is Courtney Kramer. I'm speaking as resident. I am also one of the appellants. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank all of you, not just City Council, everybody here, because this has been a long process, and this is not your only challenging issue that you're dealing with right now. We've talked about renovations in this town and how frustrating it can be and how long it can take, because the guidelines and the regulations in this town are difficult and they are very specific. So moving on with the timeline with this project, prior to Esperanza's or J.D. Pastor's purchase of the lots, the developer who we met tonight, he also went through a very grueling process of trying to build on this. First, he submitted plans to demolish the community room. Those were denied. Then he submitted plans to move the community room. Again, those were denied. In 2019, Esperanza submitted plans for Lot 10 only. So this is when these projects are, starting. So when we say that 6 years has passed, it's this project was with Lot 10. Then in 2021, they proposed the demolition of the community room, which had already been denied. So it was the denial was upheld. It was denied again. In 2023, they proposed the relocation of the community room, which had already been done again, and this also was denied. It was not until July of 2023 that a new proposal had been submitted, and that is the plan. These are the plans that we're talking about now. So when people talk about this has been so long and it's been 6 years, yes, it has been long and it has been drawn out and it has been frustrating. But it was so frustrating for the previous owner that he split the land and sold it and decided not to continue with this. There is no question that Carmel needs more housing. We do. But right now, I would like to make sure that we continue to uphold the rules and regulations and the historic requirements. And, sorry, I see my time is running out. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer.
Good afternoon, Councilmembers and Christy Ramers. The bank complex has been fought for by the public many times. Over and over since the first project was proposed in 2001, Carmel-by-the-Sea locals have stepped forward to speak for this place, to defend it, and to ensure that whatever is built there honors it and the village we love. Some people don't like the architecture of this building, and some think it's beautiful. And that's what art is. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Irregardless of a person's opinion, the complex is on our state and local historic register, and the guidelines to ensure its preservation must be legally followed. As we know, our code says no single structure may exceed 10,000 square feet, and buildings can't be connected unless separated by a qualifying open space. But there are 3 definitions of open space in our code, and when reading them, we can find that usable open space is most likely the definition that is being used for this project. The walkway is not private open space, since it is not private, nor is it a common open space, since it is not really an open space intended for enjoyment. But rather, it fits the middle definition of usable open space, because as the definition says here, it is a balcony or deck designed and accessible for pedestrian access. If we focus on this definition, then the definition also includes that it excludes any space with a dimension of less than 6 feet in any direction. The walkway between these two proposed buildings is 4 feet wide, not 6 feet. Additionally, while a small gap exists in part of the walkway to prevent a tunnel-like, non-open space area below, for a 38-foot stretch, the buildings are fully connected, with an indoor tunnel, 2 walls and a ceiling downstairs, and a 4-foot wide walkway upstairs. This violates 2 points in the definition of usable open space. First, it's not open, and second, it's less than 6 feet. Because the walkway fails the code's minimum width, it cannot count as usable open space, and that means these 2 buildings must be treated as a single structure, exceeding the 10,000 square foot limit. I feel tremendous gratitude that we have you as council members willing to take this project so seriously. Our village is small, and any new commercial building must be reviewed with the greatest care. It is like adding the final pieces to a delicate puzzle. It must fit, it must belong. Thank you for your time, your work, and your stewardship. You are the protectors of our village, and your clear care for Carmel's character shines through in the way you approach these decisions. None of us oppose a project here, and if one is presented that follows our codes, it would be wholeheartedly welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reimers. Anybody else in the chambers?
You know me well. I have spoken about this and about the pit for what seems like centuries now. We're talking about 6 years and 5 reiterations of plans on the J.B. Pasteur building. And I've talked to a couple of appellants who said, well, this isn't about him, this isn't about Esperanza, this is about the city codes and regulations. And my response to that is, it is punishing him, number one. Number two, if we have problems with unclear statements within our codes and our regulations, then let's deal with those. And indeed, we may have some problems with those. So let's look at those, but let's not punish an applicant for trying to meet those codes with the okay of the Planning Commission and the Planning Department. So it's sort of like the Mills Act. You know, there may be some problems with the Mills Act, but if someone has submitted an application for the Mills Act, the rules that are in place should be the ones that are primary and used, and then look at what we might need to do to the Mills Act to make it better for future people. But let's not change midstream. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Anybody else in the chambers? No one? Once, twice? Okay. Online?
Neil Cruz. I read the correspondence. I didn't have much time this morning, so I read the correspondence that was sent into the commission on this issue, and it blew my mind. Something amazing has happened, and I don't want the residents to miss it, because you just might. Go home and read the correspondence that was sent in for this hearing today and see what so many residents said. They all said the same thing. They said that this man, Patrice, is defending our desire to keep Carmel a traditional village, to hold on to its original character, and they have now begun to see him as their guardian, as their defender. You read that correspondence and you'll see that that's what's going on. I read the number of responses in the correspondence. There were 23 in favor. There may have been 2 that I couldn't tell if they were opposed or not. And then in the letters to the editor, there were 12 in favor and 4 or 5 opposed. All in all, that's 35 correspondence sent to the council and letters to the editor, keeping in mind that some people also wrote 2 things. They wrote a letter to the editor and they sent in correspondence. So that's about 35 to 10, okay? And when you read those, let me give you a few examples. We have been highly critical of many of the designs for new homes in Carmel. We feel that many of the designs are out of alignment with the design guidelines and disrespectful of the urban forest. Next letter. We want you to know that we support all of Patrice Pastor's building projects in Carmel. We think he has restored and beautified Carmel in all of his projects, and we salute him in doing so. Next letter. It is our good fortune that a person with means seeks to maintain the village charm that his family fell in love with, just like us. Patrice Pastor and his team have been purchasing many of our beloved and very troubled historic properties with good sense, his resources, and intent to restore and preserve them for future generations. We are lucky that he has the taste and vision to hire the best architects and craftspersons to restore Carmel to its original glory. The residents of Carmel are supporting a developer.
Almost finished, Neil?
One last thing. Patrice Pastor, whatever happens today, please do not leave this community. The residents need you. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So it seems like I called time and now people are showing up. So if there's anyone after this woman who would like to speak, I'd appreciate it if you could come line up. Otherwise, this woman will be the last person speaking in the chambers.
Thank you very much. Alison Schelling. I've owned my property in Carmel-by-the-Sea for the last 30 years. I'm here to tell you that I have developed 3 properties in the historic downtown of Truckee, California, one of which I took from a complete and utter tear-me-down into a now currently A-rated historic resource for the town. And I'm here to tell you all that if you actually think there is anyone else that can afford to take on the fabulous buildings in this town, which need gobs of money, a lot of love and respect for the property that the town represents, you think we're going to find another person like Mr. Pastor? You guys need to think again, because it is so expensive. And yet, when we have those resources that get rated as A-rated historic properties, they preserve that town and that feeling forever. And so I encourage you to do that. And as the owner of an A-rated historic property, who does not have the wealth that Mr. Pastor has, part of me wishes the hell I had never done it. Because everyone else in that town can build wall to wall. And I, in my belief in the process, absolutely went ahead and did this. And it is a thankless job, even with the tax reduction that I get. So you absolutely need people whose heart is there, who have the money and are willing to put in 6 years of insane runaround to get the job done. And this is the person who's investing in our town. We need to grab him by the legs and make sure he does not leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Schelling. Thank you for coming to the microphone.
Thanks. I would just like to echo the last 2 people that came forward regarding the resources, craftsmanship, and custodialship that Mr. Pastor is taking on this community. But I think that something that shouldn't be lost is the fact that Carmel's always been progressing. And it's the city council's duty to go through the due diligence of figuring if the progression is in alignment with the spirit of Carmel. But also something has to be recognized, that the so-called pit that's at the end of Dolores is next to the Carmel Art Center, which is the heart of Carmel. And it's killing that side of town. And to sit and squabble for prolonged, unforeseen time is a detriment to this town. And I think that in the spirit of this town, we should move forward with the progress and look to Ms. Pastor's interest and assets as an asset to Carmel's growth into the future. And I think that's been recognized by many people. And I think the city council should recognize it as well. That's all.
Would you like to give your name for the record?
Leonard.
Thanks, Leonard.
Good evening. I'm Adam Jesselnick, architect in Carmel. I'm not here to speak to the merits of the project or the merits of the appellant. I do think that there is a problem with the process that's occurred in this project, and I think that anybody who would look at it with a fair-minded perspective or who's ever been involved in getting a permit in this town would agree. One thing that I heard time and time again from people who spoke tonight and at previous hearings is a genuine care and love for this place. And I think that that's just important to keep in mind when you look at everything that's happened leading up to this point, the dollars that have been spent, the time that's been invested. And I would just urge the council to move forward. I think that sending this project back to the Planning Commission would be a horrible mistake. I think that they've made their decision. The appellants have made their case. And I think that it's the responsibility now of the council to take definitive action. So I hope that whatever you decide, that it is definitive. And as the arbiters of the code and the creators of the language that goes into calling forth what is called for in this town, I hope you'll be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Good afternoon, council, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to say, the decision you're going to make today, is it going to keep Carmel? As the creativeness of using the open space or the landscaping higher than ground level or the quirky parking, is that going to make it not Carmel? Or it kind of feels like there's all lots of quirky things about Carmel and a lot of creativity that's made adjustments to make this super unique place. So kicking this back after it's gone through the grueling process, is that keeping Carmel? I mean, that's really what we want to do. Not squabble about gimmicky parking. I think it's creative. His project kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed, like the walls coming in you in a Star Wars movie. The only way out is to stack on top. I mean, it was creativity, and that's in spirit of the artist community that we are. So hopefully your decision today weighs heavily on keeping Carmel. Thank you.
No one else? Go online. David Alvarez.
Daniel, you can unmute yourself. Daniel Alvarez.
Sorry, Daniel Alvarez.
Daniel Alvarez on Zoom. You can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Could you speak up?
Hey. So I'm Daniel Alvarez, a field representative with the NorCal Carpenters Union. And, this is a pretty good project. This project, with good labor standards can get a lot of people to work, and also, it will better.
Mr. Alvarez, could you speak a little louder?
Jobs. I got my headphones right now. But yeah, I was saying that this project can create a lot of work for the local force. Also, will make our community better because, when local workers are working on their community, people take pride on what they do. So it would be nice, to see somebody working from here, from the city, and take their kids to the beach and say, hey, I built that. I take pride on what I built. So these are good projects. I just think, with good labor standards, I just hope a good contractor gets it and go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. No more online hands.
There's no more hands.
Vince Kohler.
And I think Ms. Romero has a handout, or not a handout, but an attachment that Mr. Kohler sent in to pull up on the screen. Mr. Kohler, you can unmute yourself while Nova's pulling that up.
Thank you. Hello, council members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Vince Kohler, long-term Carmel resident. I appreciate the interest in this issue and your stamina. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person, and I want to reiterate my appreciation for the work that you're doing today and that you did 1 month ago. You've already heard from Julie Wendt why the law requires that a historic assessment be completed for this project. I'd like to summarize how the 2023 assessment is inadequate and cannot satisfy that requirement. And thank you so much, Nova, for putting up the summary document one more time. As I mentioned at the August meeting, this document is not a legitimate substitute for the required assessment. The 2023 report doesn't actually evaluate the project in front of you, nor does it evaluate the entire historic resource. We've heard a lot about the wall. This project currently is not about the wall, nor is the historic assessment about the wall. And that's again why the 2023 report is not adequate. For example, under Standard 1, it evaluates a prior proposal for a restaurant, not the current much larger mixed-use retail and residential development. Under Standard 9, about compatibility and protecting historic scale and massing, it was flat out declared not applicable, even though the new construction covers the full half of the historic resource. And finally, the report doesn't address any of the federal, state, and locally required elements of scale, massing, materials, or spatial relationships in any meaningful way. It simply does not assess any impact. So in short, this is not a Secretary Standards review as required, does not meet legal or professional threshold, and so it cannot pass, and you cannot rely your current decision on a 2023 report. So we appreciate your commitment to following the laws of our city without fear or favor, and ask that you insist on the completion of a proper historic assessment by a licensed expert. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vince. Anybody else online?
Yes. Professor Beach, go ahead.
Can you hear me? I know there's trouble in the chamber.
Yes.
Am I audible? Wonderful. Okay. Thank you again, council members, for taking the time with this and the meticulous professionalism that you've shown in the first half of this meeting, and I know will continue. I wanted to remark that since 2001, the entire bank complex at 7th and Dolores, including all structures and surrounding open space, has been recognized as historic at the state level. That's about 25 years. That status requires projects to comply fully with local, state, and federal preservation laws. Despite clear mandates laid out by the Secretary of the Interior, no developer has yet proposed a project for this site that meets them. And Courtney went over that and the 6 years of trying that were all in repeating mistakes of the past. Since 2021, as the current developers began drafting their proposed project, the community has repeatedly reached out through direct invitations, public comments, written submissions. Former officials, architects, historians, and citizens have volunteered thousands of hours to helping this project come into compliance. Yet, that process has not succeeded. Even the historic assessment, mandated by law precisely in order to reveal compliance issues, was never completed. Unfortunately, the public has no way to fix this input process while it's still underway. The only option is to appeal, and appeals are only allowed after the Planning Commission approves a project. Yes, this requires applicants to spend time preparing intermediary design drawings, but putting in time does not ever equal legal compliance. A project only complies with the law when it complies with the law. And if that historic assessment had been done early when required, everyone from owners to architects to staff to commissioners would have known the legal design parameters from the very beginning. As folks in Carmel understand, the fastest way forward for a project is not rushing ahead, but investing early in learning a property's history and the laws that govern it. In this case, laws that have governed for a quarter century. I want to again reiterate something that Julie Wentz said at the beginning, which is that you had before you two unresolved legal questions at the first half of this meeting, and you looked for some answers to those, and that was not able to be provided in timely fashion, of course, during the meeting. So the appellant group, I understand, has hired an attorney again to provide you the legal analysis on the historic issues. And also we have another former attorney who has submitted
Almost
on
finished,
the
Victoria.
size issues. I am complete. Thank you so much. I have every confidence you will continue your meticulous review. Thank you.
Thank you. No more?
There's no more hands raised.
Okay, so now I'd like to hear from the appellants and then the applicant, 5 minutes.
Good evening, council members. My name is Ian Martin. I'm a resident and I am one of the appellants. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to make these closing comments. Carmel-by-the-Sea is defined by its modest human scale size and affinity for the forested natural beauty that surrounds us. To safeguard these qualities, the city has adopted a general plan, municipal code, and commercial design guidelines that establish specific standards for development. The J.B. Pasteur building is out of alignment with a number of these essential principles. This is why we are appealing. We have no other motive than to insist that major developments fit into the character of our village, no matter who proposes them. The reasons for this appeal are as follows. Size and scale. The municipal code imposes a maximum floor area of 10,000 square feet for any single structure. The project approaches 13,000 square feet, exceeding this limit. As we have demonstrated, this is one single structure under the municipal code and must come down in size. Parking. The project requires nearly 18 parking spaces, but provides only 12, most of which use a compact car lift system and will be private. This will only make the critical parking shortage worse in our downtown. Other buildings have indeed used the in-lieu parking program to buy their way out of required parking. Those buildings met the criteria set forth in the law to make them eligible. The proposed building, however, does not. For example, as was revealed during the last meeting on August 4th, there is no technical reason why an underground garage cannot be built while also protecting the historic resource. Underground garages are a common parking solution all over the downtown and can be here too. Open space. City regulations require ground level open space with landscaping visible and accessible from the street, consistent with the traditional courtyards that enhance the downtown. The project instead counts private rooftop gardens which do not satisfy this requirement. Evaluation of historic impacts. The site has been part of a state-recognized historic complex for about 25 years now. This means that state and local laws require a full study of how any proposed project would affect this historic resource. This compulsory legal analysis cannot be avoided and yet has not been completed. In closing, please know that our objective is straightforward: to ensure that Carmel's adopted codes and policies are applied fairly and consistently. Upholding these standards is essential to protecting the unique character of the village for current residents, businesses, visitors, and future generations. We ask you to apply our laws to this proposed building to protect our village, this fragile paradise that we all cherish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. I have some slides here that we prepared. There was a lot of discussion at the last meeting about the due diligence we've underwent to evaluate the availability of parking, and that focused on underground parking. In the previous plan before the city deemed the concrete wall historic, we included below-grade parking. The plan up here shows the floor plan at the ground level for that plan. The required preservation buffer required modifications to the proposed above-grade building area, lending itself to aligning the driveway with the preservation buffer, as you can see in green here. The garage ramp, located in where red is, accommodated the goes where above-grade commercial and office or residential space is located in our next plan. If you can go to the next slide. The current plan that you have in front of you tucks the parking at grade in the back, with the driveway aligned with the preservation buffer, doubling to provide additional distance between the proposed JB Pastor project and the historical asset. The area highlighted in red is where the garage driveway would have to be located due to the grades of the street and the distance required to get the ramp to the proposed basement level of the garage. If we proceeded with a below-grade option, we would lose additional commercial space and residential space in this area. If you go to the next slide. We further studied the option with this layout of proposing below-grade parking. We've determined the maximum amount of below-grade parking we could achieve with this scenario would be 15 parking spots. As has been mentioned before, the below-grade option includes the public restrooms and it includes mechanical space. This is proposed below grade not to take away from valuable leasable space at grade. This valuable leasable space, including additional space which would be placed where the current above-grade parking is, would be needed to help partially offset the cost of the below-grade parking. We've had multiple shoring experts look at this. As Henry Runke eloquently mentioned, we need to provide a buffer zone around the perimeter of the property line to allow the needed shoring. It equates to about 3'6". That further eliminates the area available for below-grade parking. We also have the historic preservation buffer and the historic wall that we're dealing with. In conclusion, excavating for underground parking would require complex shoring near historic structures, adding a disproportionate costs and risks. To offset this, more leasable area would be needed, which only increases parking requirements, creating a circular infeasibility. The in-lieu program is not a loophole, but a city's own policy tool, allowing us to comply with zoning while investing in historic preservation, housing, and citywide parking solutions rather than expensive excavation. Can you go to the next slide? This slide was simply showing to articulate what I was saying about areas where potential additional leasable space would be looked to be added if we were doing below-grade parking. And then the next slide. I also wanted to highlight the history of this project, which has been talked about significantly. This slide shows how the JB Pastor project has consistently reduced in size through each of the submissions to address added constraints. From nearly 17,000 square feet originally down to under 13,000 square feet today. As further highlighted on this slide, the current proposal approved by the Planning Commission in April of 2025 is fully within city code limits. Building coverage is below the maximum. Floor area is well under the allowable FAR, height under the 30-foot limit, and landscaping above the required minimum. In short, the project before you not only complies with city's municipal code, it goes beyond in providing more landscaping and smaller overall footprint than what's allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any, would staff like to comment at all? Nope. All right, why don't we do this? We have a pretty lengthy discussion in front of us. Why don't we take 10 minutes? Just have a 10-minute break. We'll be back here in 10 minutes. Okay, so we're back at 4:46. What I thought we would do to sort of organize the discussion amongst the three of us, a little bit like what we did last time. If Alissandra or Hans, if you would like to say something before we start, I would say you're welcome to do that. Then I thought we would recap, the staff has laid out sort of the actions that we expressed that we wanted to take last month, and then I would propose that we go down this list of actions, barring any objections from the two of you. I'd propose that we just go down this list of actions and see if we are, all three of us are still on board with the way that these things are laid out. And then after we've had that meaty discussion, I would propose that we proceed down the list of motions and actions, motions and resolutions as produced as detailed in the staff report. Sound okay? All right, so any comments, Hans?
Yeah, I have some.
Microphone.
Yeah, I've got some sort of general comments. I wanted to take a moment here at the top to respond to some of the public comments. And we've also received, as you heard, some voluminous correspondence on this issue. Obviously, this has become a hot button issue. I think there are a few reasons for that, but I think one of the primary reasons that it struck such a nerve for folks here in town is that, they can empathize on a personal level. Most of us have had frustrating experiences with the city, particularly when it comes to things like permitting. We all know the stories. You ask a seemingly simple question about whether you can include some design element, and you're told somewhat unhelpfully, it depends. You submit plans for a house that's within the acceptable building envelope, setbacks, height limit, et cetera. And your neighbor gets the commission to essentially completely redesign your house. Someone a few houses down was approved for a certain type of roof, but for some reason you were denied. You spent hundreds of hours designing your dream home, and someone on a commission starts redesigning your house from the dais in accordance with their own taste, based on some subjective interpretation of the design guidelines. I'll tell you my own story. So we bought our house and we really wanted to do some due diligence on what exactly we could do there, because we knew in the next couple of years we would have to do some major renovations. It's also historic, so we knew that would add, another layer of process, meaning less control, more cost, more time. So I scheduled a meeting with a member of the planning staff. In fact, we met right in this room. We met right over there. And this person is a pro. So I don't want any of these comments to be portrayed as demeaning the staff in any way. Total pro, incredibly knowledgeable, totally professional, whip smart. But it was still one of the most maddening experiences that I've ever been a part of. And again, it's not an indictment of the city staff. It's an indictment of the process. And it's a process that we're all, now a part of. So the conversation went something like this. Can we replace the front door with a Dutch door? It depends. Since you're planning to do a remodel, you're gonna have to do a track 2 design study, which is gonna cost $6,000 and require a hearing before the planning commission. You'll also have to do a phase 2 historic evaluation, which is gonna cost another $2,000 and include a hearing before the Historic Resources Board. And by the way, you'll also have to cover the cost of a review by a professional historian. We can't tell you how much that's gonna cost, but it's gonna take a $1,500 deposit. Okay, well, I've got 3 kids, 3 and under. The house is only 1,100 square feet. Given that it's historic, we'll be able to get to, our 1,600 square feet with the addition. We can't guarantee that. Okay, well, the house is yellow. Can we at least paint the house white like a, normal cottage? Actually, the Planning Commission recently decided that they've been seeing too many white houses, and so white houses are, out of favor right now. Meanwhile, a block south of me, there's a house that is purple, orange, and neon green. So you get the idea, right? Everyone has their own story. A lot of you are frustrated, and you view this situation understandably through the prism of your own, negative experiences. And I guess I'm just here to tell you that I hear your frustration, and I share it. In fact, I am strongly in favor of us doing a top to bottom scrub of our processes and our rules to reduce ambiguity, to enhance predictability and fairness, and to save time and money, both for applicants and for taxpayers. I called for that in the council meeting the very next day after the first time that we heard this appeal. I've only done a handful of these planning commission appeals in my short time on the council, but I keep encountering sections of the code that are unclear, that are ambiguous, maybe poorly drafted, and there's just no reason for us not to stop and take the time and fix those things. Now, I'm not talking about opening the floodgates and saying anything goes. Absolutely not. We have rules. Those rules, however imperfect, are the reason this place still retains the charm that you all have been talking about. They are indispensable. My point is that I believe we can clarify the rules, reduce subjectivity where possible, and streamline our processes while maintaining the same level of protection for village character. So same level of protection, less consternation, less wasted time, less wasted resources, more fairness. And I think that should be our focus. Is it ever going to be perfect? No. But we can make it better. And yet, that's the work for tomorrow. Today, as frustrating as it is to watch, as frustrating as to be a part of, we have to operate within the confines of the existing laws and the existing process. So our charge in these hearings is to apply the law as it currently exists, not as we might want it to be. I mentioned it last month, but I'll say it again for the benefit of those who are, maybe just tuning in for the first time. As a council, we wear two hats. We have a legislative role and we have a quasi-judicial role. And the distinction, I think can be confusing, especially for the public. You're used to seeing us operate in this legislative role, right, where we're debating and making policy. Then we have situations like this, and it's 1% of the time, where we're acting in this quasi-judicial capacity. And in these cases, we're supposed to act as a neutral decision-making body, applying existing laws and rules to the specific facts of the case in question. Now, some have asserted that in this appeal, the council is substituting its own taste and subjective design judgments. I'm here to tell you that that is simply not the case. If you watch the hearing from last month, and if you listen tonight, there's nothing here about personal taste. We're not sitting here nitpicking about the color of the paint on the shutters. We're looking at the municipal code and trying to answer objective questions. The code requires 18 on-site parking spaces. Do the plans provide that, yes or no? If not, does the project satisfy at least one of the three criteria that would allow the project to participate in the in-lieu parking program? Yes or no? Look, there's actually a lot of things that I like about this project. Abstracting from the 10,000 square foot rule and the question of this interconnectedness, I don't think the project is out of scale. In the service commercial district, the maximum floor area ratio, and for those of you who don't know what that means, FAR, floor area ratio, basically means an FAR of 1 would be the entire site is covered by a one-story building. An FAR of 2 means the entire site is covered by a two-story building. The maximum here is 1.35. This is me going on recollection from a month ago, but I think the FAR is actually 1.12, right? So it's actually well below the maximum sort of aggregate mass for the site. There's a 30-foot height limit. I think the project is around 28 feet in height. It actually sits several feet below the bank building to the north and also below the building to the south. It would provide 8 additional rental units that are desperately needed. And I think it's an attractive design. I have friends who don't like the design. I personally think it would be a nice addition to the streetscape, certainly an improvement upon what's there. And, you know, its compatibility with the subjective parts of the design guidelines were unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. I think the applicant does good work. You know, Megan and I have walked through the Carmel Beach Hotel many times, and we find it to be a really tasteful renovation. But here's the thing. You know, for the purposes of this hearing today, all of that is totally irrelevant. So whether the architecture is to our taste, whether we have a favorable opinion of the developer, whether the applicant owns a big hole in the ground somewhere else in the city, those are things that we're simply not supposed to take into consideration in this kind of hearing. Our charge today is to apply existing law impartially and objectively with neither fear nor favor. That's what we did in the first hearing back in August, and that's what we're going to do again today.
Thank you, Hans. Alissandra?
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Hans, for that. I just want to say that decisions should not be based upon personality, popularity of the applicant, or public pressure. This is not about rejecting development or investment in our town. It is not about resisting change and not wanting new construction. This is about the law and having the applicant follow the law, regardless of who you are or how much money you have. Money that is now being used to threaten, bully, and intimidate members of this council and city. It's about applying codes and policies to all applicants. Developers may like to push the envelope and see what they can get away with. This is about defending our town and its general plan, laws, and codes, and following the rules that protect our village into the future. We are a small-scale, pedestrian character, historic charm, and that must be maintained. And I have every right to be here on the dais and to do my job. And I had every right under our municipal code to appeal the 2023 HRB decision. And all of this is the recommendation of our city attorney. And Mr. Attorney, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything you would like to add about the decision for us to be here?
I will only say that there is no reason for you to recuse yourself, and you may continue to participate in the process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alissandra. I just have a brief comment along the lines of what Hans said. You know, we've received a lot of emailed comments and a lot of public comments about Pastor and about the city's process, and those are all, you know, heard and good comments. But this isn't a hearing about that. This is a hearing about the Planning Commission's approval of the J.D. Pastor building, not about the applicant's experience elsewhere in the city. And it's not a hearing about whether or not we on the dais like the rules or whether we think the rules are cumbersome or whether the applicant thinks the rules are cumbersome. It's a hearing to determine whether the Planning Commission has followed a good process and made a good decision in granting their approval to this project. So if we can now do the next thing, let me pull up my notes here. Find the right notes. So I thought the three of us would go down and I'll summarize where we were a month ago and see if we're still on the same page. The first, the big motion in the motion that requires a 3-2 vote is to find that the project is deficient in parking and landscaping, and all three of us agreed that it was. Are we still all on that same page? Yes?
Yeah, I'd like to do.
Okay, we'll do that in a second. Hans is, I'm sure, is going to ask about wordsmithing the resolution.
Is actually, I sort of wanted to just, I don't want to do this on other points, but on the parking, I did want to do just a little bit of substantive commentary.
Yeah. The second item regards the Planning Commission's decision that the project does comply with the maximum floor area requirements of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea Municipal Code. And I think Alissandra took issue with the size of the buildings, and Hans and I, if I may be so bold, we're willing to defer to the Planning Commission on the decision to treat it as two buildings. Are we still set on that? The third item was involved the Secretary of the Interior Standards and directing, and the motion here, whether so let me figure out how to summarize this. The third item was whether the project complies with the Secretary of the Interior Standards based on the City Council Resolution 2023-099. Still a no over there?
Well, I have, and I don't want to get into it now, I'm going to wait till we get our discussion. Yes, but I feel some of the language needs to be strengthened, especially the part that's the additional analysis. And I have concerns that were brought up by the applicant, the appellant's attorney, and Julie, who spoke on behalf of her, regarding City Council Resolution 2023-099 and the problems with it.
Okay, so so you're still leaning the way you were, you're puzzled, but you're still leaning the way you were last month. And then the last item involves, the last motion involves the CEQA guidelines and finding that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. And you correct me if I see a puzzled look over there, Mr. Pierick, so, okay. So just correct me please just correct me if I misspeak.
Yeah.
It's great.
No puzzling over here.
Okay, so are we still where we were, last month?
Yeah,
Okay.
and just on that one, as in with the previous one, I want to discuss the additional analysis aspect and strengthen that language and have a discussion about that.
Okay, why don't we do those two first? If you're looking at the packet, either here or online, we're going to do, there are 4 items listed in the staff report. A motion to adopt a resolution, which is item number 1, and then 3 motions without resolution, which are items 2, 3, and 4. We're going to do item number 3 first, and then item number 4. So we could do this one of 2 ways. So I'm assuming that we have 2 votes to pass the motion to pass the motion that's presented in the staff report, notwithstanding Councilmember Dramov's objections. Do you? All right, why don't you go? And then I guess Hans and I will decide what we're going to do, what we should do.
Okay, for this one, I have the concerns, the problems with the Council Resolution 2023-099 that were discussed and mentioned by the attorney is that that resolution was just focused on the concrete wall. It was not a full analysis. It was not done by a professional architectural historian, and it concerned a previous version of the project. And then the reason I'm concerned with when we say additional analysis addressing the project's consistency with the Secretary of Interior Standards, since we've had problems in the past, I think we just need to be very clear and spell it out to whoever the architectural historian who's chosen. And I think it's very important that we find somebody that both sides agree to, that's mutually acceptable to both parties. I think it's very important that a full analysis by a qualified professional architectural historian is done, and impact on the entire complex, its open space, spatial relationships, and surrounding historic properties, including Reamer's Stonehouse Terrace, which is eligible to be listed on the Historic Register, and that we make sure that all 10 Secretary of the Interior standards are addressed and each one of those 10 is analyzed and answered. Once again, this has to do with scale and massing, materials, architectural compatibility. I mean, I can go into a lot more detail, but maybe just right now, let's leave it at that.
Want me to go?
Yeah, can I just ask Brandon a quick question?
Sure.
So question for the Assistant City Administrator, who for a long time was.
Thank you for being up here, by the way.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So apologies for not saying that sooner.
Best part of my day so far.
Me too. Assistant City Administrator, former Planning Director. A question on the three conditions that the council added by that resolution in 2023. Is the idea that for future iterations, is it the staff that makes the determination as to whether those conditions have been satisfied, those three?
It depends on how they're written. I'd have to have them in front of me, but oftentimes it does say, submit something for review and approval by the planning department, or say planning director, or if it's a public works condition for the public works director. So I don't have them in front of me, but that's often how they're written, yes.
Well, I have it in front of me,
Okay,
and I suspect you now have it in front of you.
I do, thank you. So ornamented concrete wall, prior to review of the
It's
plan.
on conditions for consistency with the Secretary's
Yeah.
standards. There are 5 conditions.
I've got the three, and then there's conditions of approval. So there's 2 separate
Yeah,
sections.
Correct.
Okay. Prior to review by the planning commission, design review plan shall be revised and submitted to the community planning and build department. So the original ornamented concrete walls located adjacent to the community room are shown to remain in their original location. So that's just have the plans been redone to show that the walls remain. So that's just a simple yes or no. That's not a determination. Then the next one was prior to review by the planning commission, the design review plan shall be revised and submitted to the community planning and building department to preserve the existing spatial relationship of the Northern California Savings and Loan Complex. At a minimum, all proposed structural elements shall be located outside of the preservation buffer as depicted in Exhibit A of this resolution. As a side note, that preservation buffer was dictated by the city council at the time. So there was a physical barrier that was put on a piece of paper. Continuing on, walkways, at-grade stairways, landscaping, paving, and similar features may be allowed within the preservation buffer. However, building elements that are defined as building coverage by our code shall not be permitted to encroach. Building eaves shall be limited to an encroachment of 18 inches or less. So again, that would be one where when the plans come in, the planning staff would review with the applicant and make their determination whether or not, give them the advice, say, you either are or are not gonna satisfy this condition when it goes to the planning commission for approval. So that ultimately would have been a planning commission decision. Preservation of site context to ensure the Northern California Savings and Loan Complex is not subordinated by the proposed development prior to review by the planning commission. The design review plan shall be revised and submitted to the community planning and building department to preserve the context of the site so that the Saving and Loan Complex remains a prominent feature as viewed from 7th Avenue and Dolores Street. Changes to be considered should include, but are not limited to, articulation of the front elevation to preserve and open the view from Dolores Street looking north, reducing and minimizing the mass of the structure or structures, to maintain to not diminish the character of the complex, and further enhancing the open space around the Northern California Savings and Loan Complex. So again, this would have been one where you submit the plans, the planning staff reviews it and sort of gives you that temperature check. The planning staff would say, we either think you did or didn't meet the test of this, but ultimately that would be decided by the planning commission, that one as well. Hope that answers your question.
No, that's great, thank you.
Must mean I said something wrong.
Just
Please correct me if I did.
A little something to add.
Okay, please.
So the last recital before the conditions say, this determination of consistency is further predicated on the following recommendations and draft conditions of approval being incorporated into the project and accepted and approved by the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea Planning Commission as part of the discretionary permit and approval for the project. And then it lists the conditions. So it was for the Planning Commission to consider.
It wouldn't have been exciting if I had just led with that. So thanks, Evan.
Yeah, so my fear, thank you, Alissandra, for your comments. My fear is that if we start going down that road, we're just going to end up going down the road that we tried to avoid going down in 2023. And I still believe that that the decision, the resolution that the council passed in 2023 at the closure of the review of the wall sort of was intended to prevent this situation from happening. And so I'm prepared to just proceed with this motion. So I'll make a motion finding for purposes of consideration by the Planning Commission upon remand.
Can I make a comment before you make the motion?
After you second it, you can make a comment. That the Esperanza Carmel Commercial JB Pastoral Building Project is, as considered by the City Council on August 4th and September 8th, is consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards based on City Council Resolution 2023-099, and further directing city staff to present to the Planning Commission on remand additional analysis addressing the project's consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards. Actually, you can just not second it and it'll just die, and you can still make your comments.
I'll second it. I think we talked about this previously in the last meeting, but there was this consultant report from 2023 that was deeply flawed. As I mentioned last time, I would have given it an F when I was a teacher, since it didn't actually really apply the 10 standards to the project under consideration. That being said, the question of consistency with the Secretary of the Interior standards was already reviewed by the prior City Council back in 2023. It's this document that we were just referencing. It basically preemptively finds the project consistent with the standards, subject to these 3 conditions that we were just talking about for the redesign, that, as we just heard, the Planning Commission would be the arbiter of whether it complies with those. The upshot is if you meet those 3 standards, you maintain consistency. That's how Councilmember Byrne, if I may be so bold, said he understood it at the time. That's how the applicant's architect told us he understood it. Now, would I have done it that way or picked those, 3 conditions? Maybe not. I do think it's somewhat problematic to issue a determination of consistency on a yet to be determined, yet to be completed design 2.0 when you're staring at design 1.0. Now, of course, we're applying this to design 3.0. But I'm told that the goal of the council at the time was to prevent the applicant from sort of endlessly going through this cycle back to the Historic Resources Board. Remember, this is after the main bank building was deemed historic, then the community room was deemed historic, then the wall was deemed historic. So the context here is the council was trying to provide some go-forward predictability for the applicant. And at the end of the day, the massing and the size have both decreased. It was 15,000 square feet and change. Now it's 13,000 square feet and change. So arguably, it's gotten better from that standpoint. Process was flawed, but the goal, I think, of providing something for the applicant to go on is understandable. So at the end of the day, since this was a council-level decision designed to provide predictability for the applicant, and since the applicant understood it as such and relied on that understanding, I'm not prepared to overturn it at this point. So I would support Mr. Pastor on this point. So I second your motion.
Any more comments? Or should just call the roll?
Just a quick
Okay.
notice, I just feel it's our duty to correct the earlier mistakes that were done by that 2023 report by past consultants that just absolutely did not address what they were assigned to do. So I feel we owe that to everybody to get that right. And right now, we're allowing a flawed document to basically go forward.
And I totally sympathize with that. It's just it was a council level decision, and I'm just not comfortable going back and overturning what the last council said with us sitting in the exact same seats. I think from a predictability standpoint, it's just a little bit of a bridge too far for me.
Okay. Call the roll.
Councilmember Byrne?
Yes.
Councilmember Booter?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramov?
No.
Motion passes 2-1.
Okay. The second thing we'll do is probably the next slide. This is motion numbers in the staff report is motion 4. This involves the California Environmental Quality Act. Should we just, any comments on this one? Should we just call the roll?
I'll make just a quick comment. Basically, it's very similar to motion 3. I feel you cannot decide the CEQA exemption until you do a full, complete historic analysis with the impact of the project and all 10 Secretary of Interior standards.
What, are you gonna do the last one? Okay.
I make a motion finding for the purposes of consideration by the Planning Commission upon remand that the Esperanza Carmel Commercial JB Pastor Building Project, as considered by the City Council on August 4th, 2025 and September 8th, 2025, categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA Guidelines, Section 15331, Class 31, historical resource restoration/rehabilitation, and that no exceptions to this categorical exemption contained in CEQA Guidelines Section 15300.2 apply to negate this exemption, and further directing the Planning Commission to consider the project's eligibility under that Class 31 exemption based on the additional analysis of the project's consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards.
I'll second that motion. I have a couple comments I'd like to make on this one. You know, over the course of the past year or two, I think that Carmel has become the subject of CEQA complaints a lot like other cities in the county, other cities in the entire state have, where CEQA is being used as it may or may not be here. I don't want to talk about this as a weapon to stop projects that we don't like. And I think it's pretty interesting that, you know, kind of anecdotally that some of the people that spoke here, you know, wish to use CEQA to stop other projects that they didn't like. And some of the people that spoke against those other projects are wishing to uphold CEQA on this project. And I think that addresses, you know, I think that shows how our use of CEQA is pretty much completely warped at this point. I'll also say, and I think I've said this before, that, you know, for a town that has consistently pretty much across all political ideologies complained about the use of CEQA at all, not only, you know, it's interesting that it keeps coming up, but it's also interesting that we could strengthen our code to incorporate aspects of CEQA that we think are worthwhile or not into our code and make them part of our code. So that is a decision that people up here on the dais can either take, that those of us in the community can either take or not take, you know, depending on whether we think the thing, you know, the sort of ideas expressed by the California Environmental Quality Act apply to this community or don't apply to this community. We could take it out of the hands of the state and put it into our local hands, and yet we have not done that. So I think that there is definitely, you know, Hans earlier in the evening was talking about our process, and I think that you know, I think that is sort of, you know, if we ever go down that, I think that, you know, looking at CEQA and figuring out whether those things really should apply or whether we want to institutionalize them in our code, I think that would be probably somewhat of a worthwhile exercise and may relieve some of the pressure I think that we're seeing in terms of the application of the state law. So Nova, could you call the roll on this motion?
Yes. Councilmember Byrne?
Yes.
Councilmember Booter?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramov?
No.
Motion passes 2-1.
Okay, so the next one, why don't we do the last motion, and then we'll do the motion that involves a resolution. Motion, this is the floor area ratio motion. You know, I think, as I hopefully said last month, I'm torn, I'm torn on the application of the floor area ratio, the 10,000 foot limit to these two buildings that are somewhat connected and somewhat not connected. But I was satisfied, I was satisfied that the Planning Commission was also torn by it and did a lot of work and required a remodel of the, of the first set of structures, however, I don't want to get myself in trouble here, the first set of structures into the second set of structures. So on this matter, I am still willing, although I am a little bit uncomfortable, I am willing to follow the Planning Commission down this path.
So I'm of a similar mind. I generally believe when it was first drafted that the intent was that any given building should be, 10,000 square feet. I don't think that they were envisioning these second-story balconies. That being said, as we discussed, in great detail last month, we put a variety of sections of the code up here. And I find the code to be ambiguous. The guidance, that I receive from the city attorney is if the code's ambiguous, there's more deference to the Planning Commission's past precedent. Here, I do find the code to be ambiguous, and although it's a bit of a slender read, there is some precedent. The pit, probably the best precedent, and another Leidig Draper proposal, neither of which happen to have been built, but definitely approved by the Planning Commission. So on this one, I'm inclined to side with the applicant. If we take this up in a policy meeting at some point, which I do suggest, I might decide differently on a go-forward basis. But since this is an appeal of a live application, I think we need to acknowledge the ambiguity in the code.
I'll just add that I stand by my decision from last time, and I support the comments made tonight by Christy Breemers and Ian Martin, that it exceeds the size.
Okay. So I'll make a motion finding purposes of consideration by the Planning Commission upon remand that the Esperanza Carmel Commercial JB Pastor Building Project, as considered by the City Council on August 4, 2025 and September 8, 2025, complies with the maximum floor area requirements of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea Municipal Code, Section 17.14.140.c.
I second that.
We have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Byrne?
Yes.
Councilmember Booter?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramov?
No.
Motion passes 2-1.
And now we get to parking and landscaping. So before we, it sounds like we're all on board with the resolution, but you had some comments you wanted to make about the word, as I called it, wordsmithing the resolution.
Yeah, I have some more substantive points about the parking piece. And Nova, if there's any way to pull up that PDF I sent.
You said the parking one
The
first?
parking one, yeah. So, obviously, as we just have been talking about, the point of this hearing is to really formalize what we talked about last month. And we would have done it all in one meeting, but there were some technicalities which prevented us from doing it in one meeting. The point is, if you go back to the tape, the rationale is all there. So I didn't want to relitigate every point today, but I did want to go through the analysis on the parking question one more time. And there are a couple reasons for that. The first is there's, again, been the suggestion that this appeal somehow turns on a matter of taste. And I'd like to show those of you who are just tuning in for the first time that we're applying objective criteria set forth in the code. And then second, in our last discussion, I was seeing a set of plans for the first time in real time. And having had the benefit of some additional time to review, I have some visuals that I think would make the discussion much clearer. So let's dive in. The relevant section of the code is section 17.38.030C. This is about in lieu parking. It says, quote, "The Planning Commission may authorize the satisfaction of parking requirements through the granting of a use permit and the payment of in lieu fees when on-site parking is not practical, or when on-site parking is prohibited by city policies." So if we could go to the next slide, please. What does the code mean when it talks about not practical, right? There's been some, discussion out there that somehow this all turns on a particular word. But actually the code tells us quite explicitly. It says, and I quote, "The practicality of providing parking on site shall be evaluated by using the criteria set forth in subsection B2 through B4 of this section." Right, so it's not like this section is unclear. As I mentioned, there's sections of the code that are ambiguous. This isn't one of them. The authors of the code make crystal clear that in order for a project to qualify for in-lieu parking, it has to satisfy at least one of these three criteria. Let's go to the next slide, please. So there are three of these. The first one says you have to satisfy at least one of the three. The first one says the project site for which the parking requirement applies is 5,000 square feet or less in size and has less than 50 feet of street frontage. That is objectively not the case here, right? In fact, it's not even close. The subject site is 12,000 square feet and has 80 feet of street frontage. Not the color of the shutters, that's just true or false question. The next one is B3. This is the second criterion. The construction of required driveways for on-site parking would result in the excessive loss of curb parking on the street. The point is they want to make sure that you're not losing too many spaces on the street. The thing is, this 80-foot section on Dolores already has not one but two curb cuts for driveways. So again, this criterion clearly is not satisfied either. So that leaves us with a third and final criterion. It has to satisfy this criterion in order to qualify for in lieu parking. This one's more complicated and has some sort of sub-criteria. B4, the topography, size, shape, or peculiar conditions of the site or the existing development on the site would make the provision of on-site parking impractical. So let's break that down. Topography, does the topography make the provision of on-site parking impractical here? No, it's basically flat, right? Size. The lot is, does the size make the provision of on-site parking impractical? The lot is 12,000 square feet, which is exceptionally large by Carmel standards. So I went back and I looked. We've been working on amending our housing element, and we created a database of every single parcel in downtown Carmel, every single commercial parcel. And, there are 223 commercial parcels that do not have a hotel use on them, right? 223. There are only 8 that are larger than this site. 8 out of 223. That puts the site in the 96th percentile in terms of commercially zoned parcels downtown that don't have an existing hotel use. So put another way, if accommodating the required parking for a mixed-use commercial project is not practical on this site due to its size, it's not going to be practical on virtually any site in Carmel. This section of the code talks about in lieu parking in a subsection of the chapter that's titled exceptions. Clearly, the drafters didn't intend for this program, which they labeled exceptions, to apply to 96% of downtown sites. So, we're on this third criterion. Topography, no. Size, no. What about shape? Does the shape make it impractical? No. It has a modest L shape if you think about the community room, but it's not like it's a flag lot, right? Do the last one, the last sub-criteria in the last of these three criteria. If it doesn't satisfy this, it doesn't qualify for in-lieu parking. Do the peculiar conditions of the site or the existing development of the site make the provision of on-site parking impractical? So Nova, if you could go to the next slide. So this is the current plan. I'll call it the 2025 plan. The current plan calls for the creation of 12 parking spaces, right? 2 surface spaces and 10 spaces for compact-sized, sort of sedans on parking lifts. So no sort of traditional underground parking. So let's go to the next slide. That being said, as it emerged in the last meeting, in 2023, the applicant submitted plans to the Historic Resources Board that showed the creation of an underground parking garage on this same site that would include 21 spaces. And so for those of you who haven't been tracking like the granular details of this over this, extended saga, the prior council created a so-called preservation buffer around the historic site to the north. The goal of which was to protect that site, and it's like 5 feet or whatever. The applicant last month argued, and to the Planning Commission, argued that the preservation buffer makes the provision of underground parking impractical. And I think it's easiest to best look at this visually. So can we go to the next slide for a second? So what I did was just overlay the preservation buffer. Let's go to the next slide. And the result is, this is the amount of space that they lost in red. Let's go to the next slide. And what you can clearly see, the ramp to get into it is on the far right, is that despite the loss of space, there's still 17 unimpacted parking spaces. And in fact, there's a fair amount of additional space. Nova, you can go to the next slide. So, to come back to this, this is, again, the final criterion, right? Do the peculiar conditions of the site or the existing development on the site make the provision of on-site parking impractical? I think it's pretty clear that the answer is no. You here have literally a site plan from the exact same site from 2 years ago, from the exact same developer, showing how you can fit at least 17 of the 18 required spaces on the site. So I don't think you can get much more definitive than that. So just to go back to the next slide. No, forward. Again, 3 criteria, none of the criteria are satisfied. So it doesn't qualify for in-lieu parking. Yes, no questions, very objective, not the color of the shutters. Briefly, I wanted to talk about the history of in-lieu parking. So kind of a final thought in wrapping this up. Some have claimed that not granting in-lieu parking is discriminatory because other projects have been allowed to participate. One recent article in the Pinecone noted or asserted that Chez Noir was an example. Chez Noir, the reality is different. Chez Noir was not granted in-lieu parking. I asked staff actually to go and create a list of every single project that has been granted in-lieu parking in this town going back to the early 70s. And to their credit, in a very short period of time, they were able to produce that by going into a couple different databases. And there are these projects, I think the first one's in like 1972. The original in-lieu program was created in 1965. According to that list, the last project to be granted in-lieu parking in this town, contrary to what you may hear or have heard in the newspaper, was in 2003, right, which is some 22 years ago. So it's not like this stuff has been thrown out there like candy. And the projects that qualified, presumably qualified based on these objective criteria. So to conclude here, again, there have been concerns raised. The appeal is being decided based on these subjective matters of taste. Having sat through this analysis just now, I hope you'll see that that's simply not the case. Nor is this an area where the code is unclear, right? In order for a project to qualify for in-lieu parking, it has to satisfy one of those 3 criteria. That's an objective question. As we've seen, the answer to that question is objectively no. It doesn't give me any particular satisfaction to say that. I'm just trying to answer the question that's very clearly set forth in the code. And I think you just, if you give it an honest look, if you follow that analysis, you come to the same inescapable conclusion when you sort of impartially apply the code to this project. So. I think the resolution does a good job of capturing in general where we landed on parking, so.
I agree, and Hans, thank you very, very much. I think the whole community and all of us benefited from your breakdown, and it shows how we're looking at objective criteria, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. My quibble with the resolution is on the subsection 3s, which say that the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking lift system can be operated safely. And I don't think that that was my thinking, and I'm not sure that while I think that parking lift systems, I think that's not appropriate here. I'm not sure that safety is the right reason.
I respectfully disagree. I think it's a huge concern, especially because it's out in the open. It's not something that's underground. And we've heard of people with parking lifts, but it might be in an individual homeowner where they put their classic cars in their garage. But we're talking about something that's out in the open that is easily accessible to members of the public, children, animals. I mean, there were legitimate safety concerns on that, so I don't have a problem with keeping that in.
What I was actually, thank you for the comments. What I was actually suggesting was adding something to the word safely. My fault for not being clear on it. I have doubts whether 10 people that are sharing a garage, 10 people that are sharing 5 lifts in a parking garage would be able to manage these lifts so that they were parking in the garage all the time. Do you share that? No?
I'm respectfully, I'm not one of the decision makers on this council, sir. My choice.
I wonder, if we're allocating 10 parking spots, let's say for the 10 apartments that are there, I'm wondering whether they would be used by the 10 people there, or whether they would actually be used, or whether people would be afraid of them and park on the street, or what? I just have concerns.
So I spoke to Brandon a little bit about this, earlier today, and I was just trying to think about what's the right way to do this in the context of this appeal, because most of these findings relate specifically to this project. Could I interest the two of you in having us ask the Planning Commission to come back with a proposed policy on parking lifts that's sort of more comprehensive?
My only concern with that is I don't want that to cloud this. I mean, they need to be two separate things, and we need to, as somebody said, decide with the policy the way it is now, and we don't even have a policy on this. But Jeff, I definitely share your concerns about not only whether the people who have apartments there would be using them, but not everyone's going to even have a small car that could necessarily even be something that would work with the lift. I think this whole thing, since it is something relatively new, yes, we should have Planning Commission eventually, look it over and come up with a policy, but I just want to make sure that that's something separate from what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I'm totally open to ideas as long as,
Well, I would say, safely and the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking lift system can be operated safely and will be readily available and used by the tenants of the building. I mean, I'm willing to I'm willing to sort of punt it back to the planning commission. If the applicant decides to use the lifts again, I'm willing to sort of punt it back to the planning commission for a decision. But I'd like to impose some, guardrails, if you will, around what the parameters that they might choose to approve a parking solution that involves these devices.
Yeah.
We can leave it off. I'm not gonna.
No, I'm happy to do that if we couple it with, some direction for them to provide some policy. I mean, in general, my order of preference would be folks try to do underground parking. If you can't do underground parking, I actually think this parking lift thing is pretty creative. I think there's some open questions about the height of the cars, right? And whether you can, put all your you can just use all your compact cars and then use the in lieu for all the standard cars. There's some stuff about that. But in general, underground parking, if you can't do that, parking lift. If you can't do that, then in lieu parking. So I could go with your construction there for the finding. I would urge us to also ask the planning commission to put together a broader policy.
The thing that troubles me about asking them to put together the policy, which I'm not at all opposed to, is that there are only 3 of us up here. And I don't feel particularly comfortable, even if it was all 3 of us, I don't feel particularly comfortable giving the planning commission direction because of that. It's sort of like setting precedent. The idea of setting precedent in decisions is a little bit fraught when you don't have the entire council sitting up here on the dais
Yeah, well, I think there's a majority up here. My main concern is more practical, which is we have a kind of a sui generis situation. It's a novel issue that we're trying to deal with, and it's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to the applicant, to staff, to not have any kind of clear policy on it, because I think it's going to come back before us at some point.
I just want to add again, as I have concerns with this lift system out in the open. If it's in an underground garage, that's more limited to the people who have access to it, and assuming it's going to mostly just be the tenants, the residents of that building. But having it out in the open with new technology, we've never experimented with that, and having that many, I just really find that problematic for a safety standpoint.
Well,
give me your language one more time.
Well, I'm thinking, I need a second. I'm thinking about what Alissandra is saying. And what I'm hearing her say, I'm gonna repeat it back, is that there's virtually no instance of using this lift system above ground that would pass muster with her. And I'm trying to decide, I'm thinking about whether that's the case. When we use these whether that's the case for me, whether we use these, when we see these systems in cities, they're generally staffed by professional operators and access to, you see them in like New York City parking lots, and they're staffed by professional operators, in sort of closed systems, and you just don't have access to your car. And now we're talking about taking something that was obviously developed for car aficionados with too many cars to fit in their garage. I know someone in that category, by the way, and for their sole, I can't believe we're having this discussion, for their sole use in their private property, and now we're talking about
Look,
thrusting it in the world in this, so Alissandra would like us to just ban it. ban them in this application where they're above ground.
I mean, I think I said it last time, or maybe I alluded to it, but I literally tried to install parking lifts on a building that I own in Dallas, Texas, an investment property, and, libertarian, Texas town told me to go pound sand, right? So, but I think there is some potential here. We are a very space-constrained community. I think that, I don't think that we should be, figuring it out here up on the dais with the three of us. I think we should send it back to staff, get some practical, some best practices that they've seen in other places. You could imagine a situation where this has to just be in a segmented section of the garage, whatever. But I'm not prepared at this point to just totally throw it out. I agree with you that like in a publicly accessible place, we shouldn't have things going up and down underground like that without some thought to it. So, the language that you threw out there earlier, I think is okay. I am concerned about the safety issue. I've given my sense that in general.
How were you going to do it? Like when you were going to install, let me ask for you on the spot, when you were going to install it in a building in Texas, were you just going to hand the tenants the keys and,
it was in a private garage. It was a 2-person garage, and we were going to put it inside the garage. It'd be only accessible to the tenants. But, they're smarter than me, and they got one that goes actually underground, and I, was struggling to fit it. But anyway, that was the situation.
Well, I'd be okay in sort of finding a middle ground and just saying, the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking lift system can be operated safely and will be readily available and used by the tenants of the building. And, we've had a discussion about safety. We've had for the purposes of this, we've had a pretty lengthy discussion about the safety of the car lift system. And I would be really surprised if it appeared back on the ground floor.
Brandon, is this something that the planning commission would just create a policy on with, out of their own volition, or do we need to provide some direction?
I think it would be best to have direction from the council, and you're right, sir, this is a majority, so you could, provide some direction. It would be constructed similar to how we do most policies. We're working on a roof policy right now. Staff would spend some time doing some research, doing thoughtful planning work, which of course is staff resources and time. Put together sort of like what's the problem statement, maybe offer some solutions, and then have, some sort of like workshop type of meeting with the planning commission. There would be some sort of policy constructed. If it came out of that first meeting, great, it might take another meeting. And then the planning commission would essentially forward a recommendation to the city council for some kind of adoption. That could be part of, an overall look at the in lieu parking program in general, which, as you noted, has been around since, the 60s. Or it could just be specific to parking lifts and how they relate to the in lieu program. So it would be up to what the council wanted done.
Well, I'm a little bit confused. I mean, the planning commission makes de facto policy decisions all the time without our input.
If we wanted
they
to-
had a policy on metal roofs, for example,
Right.
for.
If you wanted something that was like a definitive, like city council policy, I'm just explaining the process for getting a policy back to you, how it would come back to you. Certainly the planning commission, and they did in this case, makes their own interpretations when there's no, codified clear policy on how something does. That's how this decision was made. It was their interpretation of whether or not parking lifts were appropriate in this case, and if they met the standard.
Well, if we wanted to do the parking lift policy, I mean, we could do that in a separate motion.
Certainly.
And not, I mean, there are
I would
three of us
actually-
here.
I would
mean, if
actually
we could get
suggest-
3 votes, we could do that, and then put that aside, because that obviously wouldn't apply here, because this is a project that has been going for a while.
Despite my statement of not being a decision maker, I would strongly urge you to not make it part of this. That would be a separate action. Just from an administrative perspective, I would say, don't lump it with this decision. Make your choice on this language, and then if you want to create a motion for staff to work on something, please do that separately.
Okay, I make a motion that we direct staff and the planning commission to come back with a comprehensive policy on parking lifts.
I hate to be a spoil sport here, but I don't really think that's on the agenda. So my recommendation would be that you put that on your next agenda and when you have the full council here.
We could have heard that comment 10 minutes ago.
Okay, I support your language.
Okay, so the language, just to be clear, would be safely, demonstrate the parking lift system can be operated safely and will be readily available and used by the tenants of the building. How about safely in the context of where it is installed?
Sure.
Does that pass muster with you, Alissandra?
I like the second version better than the first, for sure.
I mean, for staff, you know, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So I would make a motion.
Can I interrupt you for a moment? I'm sorry. I guess I already have. I have a question. Councilmember Buder, you mentioned some lists that you had been provided by staff relating to in lieu. Is that in the record? Do we have that? No.
No.
Then I think we should probably put it into the record.
How do we accomplish that?
Pardon me?
How do we accomplish that?
I think my advice would be we take a short recess, have copies made, and put them on the city clerk's desk, let everyone in the public see it, and also to allow both the applicant and the appellant 3 minutes each to comment upon it.
On the list?
Yes, comment on the list.
I mean, with respect, you know, last time we got criticized for having a 6-hour meeting. Brandon can speak to this. You know, we're happy to make the thing public, but I don't know. I don't think we need to take half an hour to, you know, do that.
I think, I don't think it's half an hour. I think it's 15 minutes. And I think we should do it.
Can I just add,
Yeah.
this may not make a difference, but I believe in last month's Public Record Act requests, a representative of the applicant did ask for that and has that material available. Nova, does that sound right?
Yeah, they did make a PRA request for that and they received it. I don't remember the date. I have to go to my desk to find out.
It was after our first meeting, I
I
believe.
think so.
A representative of the applicant or the appellant?
Applicant, Esperanza Group.
That doesn't change my recommendation.
All right, why don't we take, how many minutes?
I guess that would be a question for Evan.
I can just go print it right now.
Pardon me?
I can just go print it right now.
Why don't we take,
Okay, 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
10
5 minutes?
5 minutes.
And have you go print it out. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay. Let's just start. Let's just go back. So this is a list. I think this is the same list that was supplied to the applicant to the Public Records Act request.
I can't confirm that. This is a list that I put together with our finance department and our planning department, but it conceivably must be the same.
I think the city clerk can confirm.
Yeah.
Well, and ask her.
I need to confirm that it's the exact same list. This one. Do I have? Oh, Brandon's making me, someone's making me a copy.
Here. Let's hope it's the same list.
I emailed it to you, Nova, as well, so
Okay.
you know.
Looks a little bit, theirs looks a little bit different, but it might just be because it has lines around.
Yeah, and this includes the interest payments as well.
So this one's the app, the,
Can you scroll down, Nova? Let's just make sure that that's the end of the list. Yeah, okay. So it ends in 0304 with the Forge.
so I'm confirming that it's the same list with even more information.
That's right. It appears that this includes entries for interest to the account.
Okay.
Then I have another suggestion, that the one that we're seeing up on the screen be put into the record as well, so that since there's been discussion about it, we know what we have that's been distributed, and then this copy up here, which apparently is the same, except for it's got some, in the tabular, it's a table form, and it has interest in it.
Okay, can we do that without taking another break?
We don't need to take a break.
Okay,
So I would leave it up on the screen.
Okay, so it has been recommended to me that I open this up only to the applicant and then the appellant to comment on this list. And I would ask you, Mr. Reynolds, thank you, by the way, for being here. I would ask you, Mr. Reynolds, if you could just confine your 3 minutes of comments to this list, which I think you have received previously. I would really appreciate it.
So I want to bring to your attention, and hopefully we can put it up on the screen, that we did receive the conditions of use.
No. I'm sorry. I'd like to.
No, you need to hear how this ties to the list. This ties directly to the list. The list is not accurate because we received the conditions of use for the Chez Noir project, which in number 27 says that the requirement to provide 5 on-site spaces is up on the screen. Has been reduced to 2 on-site spaces. The 2 on-site spaces shall be reserved for use by the second floor apartment tenants. A parking in lieu fee shall be paid for the remaining 3 spaces prior to the issuance of a building permit to construct the new building for which the in lieu fees are required. So we have real concerns with the accuracy. I'm talking about the list here. And the second point I'd like to make is just as a matter of common sense, if you did have a restaurant, you all know that you've seen the Chez Noir restaurant, there's two spaces there, they're both reserved. Where would the other parking be if they weren't part of the parking program? So in terms of this list, I am concerned that you may be relying on something that's not entirely accurate here. So I'd ask the city to check this again and confirm what we're seeing here is not correct about the Chez Noir site up on the screen. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I believe, excuse me.
Yeah, let's just.
Okay, first of all, I'm impressed that the city can produce such a document. That's, as a data nerd, I think I'm blown away by that. Chez Noir is a 4,000 square foot lot, you know, and it's impractical to fit the commercial needs of that space in terms of how many parking spaces they ought to have on that site. And what was there before was another building that was a restaurant use. So just a quick glance, I believe that was an appropriate use of in lieu parking. Whereas as Hans very clearly demonstrated, you more or less have a blank slate here of a 12,000 square foot lot. Other than that, the Ramers building has come up a few times. That was a building that was built in the mid-1970s, and they had constraints on their lot due to mature oak trees. So they applied for in lieu. This council back then, or whoever the agency was, decided, yes, you qualify for in lieu because of these huge, beautiful oak trees. Therefore, it's impractical to provide all the parking required to, so yes, you can use in lieu parking for that. Beyond that, I would have to do a deep dive into all these other projects to really familiarize myself with them. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to where we were. We were discussing the, language of, in this resolution 2025-076.
Councilmember Brandon. Does Brandon have a comment on the Chat Noir?
Would it be okay if I speak to the Chat Noir, or would you just want to take those comments and move forward?
I'd like Brandon to speak to the Chat Noir.
Okay.
Okay. So the Chat Noir item, there's a bit of a history there, but long story short, they ended up not having to pay into the in lieu parking. It is true that there was a version of the project that had that condition on there. However, they came back to the city and made the case that there was no net increase in the total number of parking spaces needed. And so they had their in lieu parking waived. So there's more to that story. That's why they did not show up on that list.
So to be clear, they did not.
Nope.
So they did not participate in the in lieu parking. That's correct. It was deemed a remodel of an existing building with a reduction in commercial square footage and the addition of apartment, no net increase.
What was there before?
It was, I believe, a restaurant.
So they went from one restaurant to another, and I'm sort of ad-libbing this. They went from one restaurant to another restaurant. Mm-hmm. And so the commercial use didn't change, and so the net parking use didn't change, so they were not required to.
They came back and essentially asked for a modification of the conditions and were granted that.
Okay.
It's also a 4,000 square foot lot,
correct,
right?
sir.
So by definition, they would qualify for in lieu parking.
And they did.
Right, because the first criterion objectively is the property less than 4,000 square feet in lot size, and does it have less than 50 square feet of street frontage? And the question, the answer to that's yes, right? So any property that satisfies that is going to qualify by definition, so.
Okay, so I'm going to read to Alissandra and Hans, I'm going to read where we were. So we were discussing the language in the resolution, section 1, subsection A, subsection Roman numeral 3. And the language that I had sort of ended up on was the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking lift system can be operated safely in the context of where it is installed and will be readily available and used by the tenants of the building. You okay with that verbiage?
I'm just a little bit unsure about how that can be proven. Like, what are you looking for?
I was going to defer to, my thought was that we should just defer that to the planning commission. Like, I'm comfortable doing that. That's what we are doing anyway. So, given this language, the proposed language already deferred to the planning commission in terms of safely.
I'm almost worried we're adding too many words. Brian, do you mind weighing in on this? And I don't want us to get.
Resolution's 5 pages.
I know. Tied up on this one point, but.
Well, it's up to the discretion of the council as to what they want to put in there. That's, by my standards, not too many words.
My thinking, Alissandra, is that I'm tightening up the phrase from 10 words to 30 words and tightening it, setting more parameters about what would be allowable in this situation.
Can you read it all over one more time?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No worries. The applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking lift system can be operated safely in the context of where it is installed, which goes to your concerns about it being installed in with sort of quasi-public access. And now back, safely in the context of where it is installed and will be readily available and used by the tenants of the building. So that satisfies my concern that the tenants won't use it.
I would just chime in that my concerns about the parking lifts, safety was one of them, but I think this question about are they going to be used given the height limitations? For example, I think it captures sort of the broader spectrum of my concerns. I think that's my 2 cents.
Okay, I understand where you're going with it. So if more words help will help the planning commission in their decision, then I can understand.
Okay. So I would then make a motion to approve resolution number 2025-076 with the, as presented in the staff report, with the change that,
Should we talk about the landscaping at all, or?
oh, we should talk about the landscaping, my apologies.
Could I interrupt you again? That change that you just proposed is on parking. There's an A.
I was going to read it. Yeah, there are two.
It's an A3 and in B3.
And a B3.
Okay.
That's correct. I'm completely okay with the way the landscaping is called out in the resolution. My apologies for skipping that before.
I'm fine with it too.
Yeah, my only concern was that it wasn't as clear that the required open space should be at the ground level. It just says visually accessible. And that's just not how I read the code. You know, when I hear required open space, I think it's pretty clear that they're talking about the portion of the site that's not covered by the building footprint. And so this language just talks about, you know, visually accessible. So you could imagine a situation where it's visually accessible because it's lower down or something, but I don't think that's what, I don't think that's what the intention is, but I'm not gonna die on the hill.
I need 30 seconds. So I guess my question for you is, you think, so you're putting forth the proposition that the landscaping should be on the ground floor?
Well, the code says, why do I not have the code up here? It requires a minimum of 50% of the required open space on each site shall be landscaped.
Right.
You know, the required open space is you take the maximum allowable building footprint, like the maximum site coverage. So like.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
We could just add to the general public after visually accessible. Would that help clarify?
I have some language if you want to look at it, that I think could work.
Look, there it is.
It's just waiting.
Which is, where's the red line here?
I didn't do a red line because I was crunched for time.
Would neither be at ground level nor visually accessible. I have a question for staff. So the sort of gist of this conversation is we're trying to get the landscaping off the roof. And there are only two places for it to go, the ground floor and the first floor.
Yeah, this
The ground floor and the second floor.
This language is a little bit intentional. So if you look
The
at-
language is up there, or
Oh,
the
sorry.
language?
No,
That's
sorry.
not your language.
No,
Your
sorry.
language is in the
I was
back.
looking down. The language in the resolution is a bit intentional. If you look at our commercial design guidelines as well as the context of the commercial district, it's not uncommon to have landscaping in, for example, a planter box on a window. So if it's actually on the ground, that would preclude landscaping being, on a planter box on a second floor window. If you look just the building right next door, that planter box is on the second floor window. That wouldn't be building coverage because it's outside of the building, but it is mounted on the side of the building. It is visually accessible. I don't know if, right there. That is landscaping that is visually accessible as presented in our commercial design guidelines.
See, I don't think.
You should show that to the public too. I don't know if they can see it, but maybe walk a little closer with it.
My point is that I don't believe that that is what's contemplated here in the plain language of the code.
So you think the commercial design guidelines are in conflict with the plain language of the code?
No, I'm just saying that what he just showed, like it says, it requires that a minimum of 50% of the required open space on each site shall be landscaped. What is the required open space?
Well, that's 12,000 square feet.
No, it doesn't. It's not a calculation. That's the thing, is it's not saying this is the amount that can go anywhere. It's saying 50% of the required open space, like the part that's not covered by the building, shall be landscaped. That's my contention here.
So what's the allowed, so this is a 12,000 square foot lot, so the required open space is 1,800 feet? What's the required
Let
open space?
me walk through, so like to make up round numbers that people can follow. Like if you have a 10,000 square foot lot and the maximum site coverage is 75%, the maximum allowable building footprint is obviously, 7,500 square feet. So the required open space is 2,500 square feet. It's the difference between 10,000 and the maximum building footprint. And then 50% of that 2,500 square feet that's not covered by a building at ground level would have to be landscaped. And I think whether it's in a planter box, that's this high off the ground, I think that's the same thing. I think what Evan's showing, a planter box that's 20 feet in the air, that's clearly not what the code is saying.
Well, it's 10 feet in the air because it's a planter box for a second story planter, right? A window planter.
50% of the required open space on each site shall be landscaped.
So Evan, that picture you showed, you're a professional planner, you're familiar with our commercial design guidelines. Does that fit in the context of the commercial design guidelines? Counting those 3 square foot planter boxes or whatever it is?
Well, I can just read the design guidelines.
Okay.
Carmel.
Is there a way to share that?
Yeah. Can you just pull up Google Carmel commercial design guidelines?
There's more water.
Yeah, no.
This one? Says nothing.
Huh?
This is it.
Draft. It's always a good thing to see on the screen. Brendan's chuckling because he heard the comment.
Page 19. If it's up on the screen, I don't think I need to read it all.
Please read it.
So Nova, can you go up one page? So Carmel is noted as the village in the forest, and the forest should not end at the boundaries of the commercial district. Improvements to property that incorporate trees and other living plant materials attractively arranged and maintained are desirable. Significant trees, as determined by the city forester, need to be preserved, and site design should provide for additional trees. Healthy trees are encouraged, as is the location of trees within the interior of blocks and away from street frontages in order to enhance the distribution of trees and to create a more effective canopy. Permanently installed planter boxes are encouraged. Next page, please.
Excuse me, Evan, could you say what document you're referring to and what page you're on?
This is the Commercial District Design Guidelines. It's page 18 of the document, page 19 of the PDF if it's downloaded. And we're continuing on to page 19 of the document, page 20 of the PDF. Item 3, street furniture, benches, trash containers, drinking fountains, etc. can be a welcoming feature in the commercial area, but should be carefully selected for compatibility with surrounding architecture and commercial activity. Benches should be carefully sited to avoid congestion and litter problems. Flower boxes under display windows, hanging baskets of floral displays in interblock walkways, and formal flower beds in courtyards are frequent and encouraged. So those are the 4 points of landscaping.
And which image who were you showing earlier?
I was showing the one on the bottom right.
The one that's on the screen now?
Yes, correct. Primarily in red.
I'm okay with the language in the resolution. Sorry. I'm okay with the language in the resolution.
Can we, nope, I'm sorry, could we see what Hans had, what is, Hans, can you tell us what the main difference of what you added in yours?
It references ground level. I think that example of that hanging planter box is a good example. So it's visually accessible. My contention is it's not part of the required open space because the required open space, I think it's clearly talking about the ground level, but
Councilmember Buder, can I make a suggestion if I think
Can I hold on one second?
Yeah.
So I'm going to rephrase what you're saying. So you're saying that the municipal code requires that a minimum of 50% of the required open space on each site shall be landscaped. But staff is but we are allowing the landscaping to happen. But this design allows the landscaping to happen in areas which are not part of the required open space. Okay.
I was just going to offer, if you have some ideas about language, it seems to me like what you're saying, if you were okay with the hanging flower baskets and that they're visually accessible from the ground floor.
No, I'm
But
not.
they're
You're
not part of,
okay
they're
with
not
that.
part of.
I'm okay with them being encouraged. I'm just saying the code says.
Required open space.
Okay.
I'm okay with what Hans is doing because Jeff, in the same way with what we did with the parking safety, I think the more specific we can be, the more detailed we can be in what we're trying to convey. I think that's helpful to the planning commission. So I would be in favor of doing the more detailed.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that,
I might offer one more suggestion just for council to consider. Perhaps think about other properties in town like the Carmel Plaza where there may be a debate about what ground floor is. So I think being overly specific in a condition like this, sort of like writing what the intent of the code is in a condition might be problematic when it goes back to the planning commission versus not specifying ground level and just using the language from the code, which is visually accessible.
Again, we're obviously down a rabbit hole. My whole point is just that, we had a situation where we were putting the landscaping on the roof because the staff had, I think, incorrectly interpreted this and fed it to the planning commission for, I'm not sure how long, but to basically say, to treat this as a calculation. To say, hey, what's the number when I say 50% of the required open space? They were using the part of the property not covered by the building. They were using the same calculation, but then they were just using it as math and then saying, well, you can put that on the roof, you can put it in a planter box. My interpretation of what we're doing here is to try to say, what does the code say? I think it's talking about the required open space being
Landscape.
Yeah, so, I'm not gonna die on the hill. I don't think, if this was the only thing, would I hold up the project over it? No, but we're here, we already talked about the parking. And I also think it's helpful just to talk about this for the benefit of staff. I'm pretty clear that the drafters of the code, were envisioning a site plan and saying, hey, the part of the site plan that's not covered up by a building, half of that needs to have landscaping. And now admittedly, the definition of that as you draft it here could become complicated, but there's clearly a way to do it that achieves, that end. We could either go with something that's sort of part of the way there. We could just go with what's written. Like I said, it's not a hill that I'm gonna die on, but I'm pretty confident that that's what the drafters of the code meant.
Well, sir, I'd suggest perhaps the language you're most concerned about then is the open space. So perhaps rather than the ground level language, which doesn't exist in the code, I think it sounds like you as a council member are making the finding that the proposed project did not put landscaping in open space and it was not visually accessible. Those are the two things that were most concerning perhaps.
No.
Okay.
But I think Brandon's right. I mean, I think that this could be fixed by changing it to say landscape requirement, because this landscaping is not in the required open space, right? And was not visually accessible. I think that addresses your issue, which is, I'll write this down.
Where are you inserting that?
Landscaping. Because the project's landscaping on the roof should not be included in the calculation of the 50% landscape requirement, because this landscaping is not in the required open space and is not visually, and is not
It is not visually accessible.
is not in the required open space.
Nova, can you put the original language back up there? Sorry.
From the code?
No, from the resolution.
You can go to Evan's PowerPoint, Nova. That'll have the language on it. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the last page. Right there. So the words I have start at, landscaping on the roof, I'm starting halfway down the paragraph. Because the project's landscaping on the roof should not be included in the calculation of the 50% landscaping requirement, because this landscaping is not in the required open space and is not visually accessible. And without the inclusion of the landscaping proposed for the roof, the project will have less than 50% of required open space landscaped.
I'm okay with that. That sounds good.
I'm okay also.
Is it possible for the city clerk to make those changes so we can all see it? Or is that going to be too much trouble? Or you could just type it on a slide? I don't know.
Well, I'm happy to read out the entire, section in my motion.
Yeah, that would be an alternative, because.
Let's do that.
Okay. To
Why
get
don't you
this
do that?
underway.
Yep, so everybody knows.
Okay, so I would make a motion to adopt resolution number 2025-076 with the following modifications. The following three modifications. The first two are section 1, subsection A, subsection 3. It should read, the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking list system can be operated safely in the context of where it is installed and will be readily available and used by the tenants of the building. So that is section 1A3 and section 1A3 and section 1B3. And that section 2, landscaping, read as follows. City Municipal Code section 17.34.080.a.1 requires minimum of 50% of the required open space on each site to be landscaped. The city council finds that the project does not comply with the city landscaping requirements in the City Municipal Code section 17.34.080.a.1 or the intent of those landscaping requirements, because the project's landscaping on the roof should not be included in the calculation of the 50% landscaping requirement, because this landscaping is not in the required open space and is not visually accessible. Would not be visually accessible, and without the inclusion of the landscaping proposed for the roof, the project will have less than 50% of required open space landscaped. I think I have an extra, would not be visually accessible in there.
I think we can make it work with that, sir. We got what you said.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's my motion.
Second.
Councilmember Byrne,
Oh, sorry, hold on a second. Any comments? Okay,
Councilmember Byrne,
yes.
Councilmember Booter,
Yes.
Councilmember Dramov,
Yes.
motion carries.
So we are finished. Thank you, everybody, for coming and participating in this hearing.